Chapter 1469. Han Fei had thought that the difficulty of the problem might lie in the special shape of those unconventional collection patterns. The Penrose stairs, Han Fei felt, couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Otherwise, anyone would be able to experience a higher dimensional world. At this moment, this B** starred kept telling himself, this is a F** king map pushing game. One levitating stone after another was pushed forward. Damn it, how long do I have to push this off? Even if someone spent thousands of years studying, he might not be able to deduce all the possibilities, right? Besides, Chunguzi just said that halfway through, he might make a mistake and push it to another road. When the two roads are connected, you can't say that it's wrong. You still have to push it forward. Han Fei felt that this stupid method couldn't be tested one by one, right? Damn it, haven't they learned mathematics? Han Fei suddenly wondered why the ideal palace existed. There were many possible purposes. However, the most fundamental purpose was probably to let someone obtain this navigational multitude, right? And in this world, only two people could obtain this navigational multitude. One was himself, and the other was his sister. Because only the two of them could enter the real reincarnation. By chance, he happened to be one step ahead, so this navigational multitude could only be his. Only he could go to the central holy city. However, Han Fei was a little confused. It was impossible to deduce such a complicated God's memorial tower. Even if a deity were to come, they would also get lost if they traveled this way. Then, how did old Han, the thug patriarch, and Ren Tianfen get to the immortal palace? Did they go there through star beads? The danger of going there through star beads was countless times higher than going to the God's memorial tower. Besides, if star beads could go there, then they wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. They could just sneak into the immortal palace to cultivate. After all, the big clans could guard for a day or two, but could they guard for 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years? At this moment, Han Fei stepped on the soundproof array and raised his chin. Tell me, what news do you have? Seeing the speed at which Han Fei set up the array, Lu Yi was shocked. So fast. This person's strength must have reached at least the peak level of a law enforcer. This kind of guy who was going to transcend tribulation was very rich. Lu Yi immediately chuckled. This brother. My information, do I have to, pay a deposit or something? Han Fei smiled and waved his hand, and 10 caddies of spirit awakening fluid appeared in his hand. A caddy of spirit awakening fluid is worth 3,500 high-quality pearls on the Scattered Stars Island. Let's see how you answer. Hiss. Luizhong's saliva almost dropped down. He immediately said, I'll talk. Brother, let's talk about it. Can you? Han Fei casually threw half a kilogram of spirit awakening fluid over. Han Fei said, I don't care what method other people use to challenge the God's memorial tower. I only want to hear the kind of information that no one else knows, but is very valuable in the hands of intelligence dealers like you. The rest of the spirit awakening fluid is all yours. This scene made the eyelids of Wang Santai and Chen Guzi, who were watching from outside the soundproof array, jump wildly. Is this person really so arrogant? Make a deal with spirit awakening fluid? Slurp. Knowing that he had met a big customer this time, Luizhong hurriedly smiled obsequiously. I know, brother, you definitely won't be interested in this kind of unsophisticated method. I won't talk about this anymore. I'll tell you about the strange happenings in the God's Memorial Tower. Luizhong said, I've never told this news to anyone. The God's Memorial Tower is guarded. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, how do you know that someone is guarding it? Luizhong said, that was more than 200 years ago. Because there was a venerable realm powerhouse who was going to destroy this place. I don't know what method he used to bring his full strength in. In the end, what do you know? He only came in for less than 10 minutes, and then the heavens cried and he died. That doesn't mean. There is a strong master guarding it, does it? Lu Yizhong's eyes glanced at the spirit-awakening fluid. Han Fei didn't care this time, and threw another 2 caddies of spirit-awakening fluid over. This guy continued, "It is said that before the Venerable died, he left 2 words, someone." Han Fei. "What words?" Lu Yizhong replied, "Someone." Han Fei sweated. "Is there a sequel to this story?" Lu Yizhong shook his head. "No." Han Fei rolled his eyes. "Not even a sequel? What are you trying to tell me out of the blue?" Han Fei had already guessed that if there was really someone, it must be the controller of the Immortal Palace. He would just listen to a story. Anyway, he had only been out for a few days, and there was still a long way to go before the 1-year promise. Lu Yizhong said, "I have another piece of news. I saw it with my own eyes. It was at least 10 caddies of spirit-awakening fluid." Han Fei sneered. "Say whatever you want. I'll decide how much it's worth. If you don't tell me, I'll find someone else." Lu Yizhong was stunned. He had never seen such a shameless man. He was so arrogant that he didn't even care about him. However, the spirit-awakening fluid in his hands couldn't fly away. Lu Yizhong smiled obsequiously. "Well, brother, I saw it with my own eyes. Speaking of which, one morning 7 years ago, I saw a white skeleton on the 15th floor of a certain path. With a swoosh, it disappeared. My road is top secret. So far, my news is already worth 10 caddies of spirit-awakening fluid, right?" Han Fei paused for a moment and said after a while, "Do you have a sequel to your story?" Lu Yizhong was surprised. Isn't this enough? This means that I have encountered a weird event. Maybe I'm on the right road." Han Fei curled his lips. "Brother, forget it. I'll give you 1 caddy. You've tried your best to make up a story. I understand." Han Fei patted Lu Yizhong on the shoulder, removed the soundproof array, and then looked at Wang Santai. "Come here. I heard that you have a guess." Lu Yizhong was stunned, looking at the 2 caddies of spirit-awakening fluid floating in front of him, and then sighed. Indeed, every time I said this, others thought it was fake. But how could any of them know that they had really seen it? Han Fei was thinking, 7 years ago, it should be the Thug Patriarch. Why did the Thug Patriarch know the route? Without the nautical panorama, how could he find the way to the God's Memorial Tower? Even the old monster of the Chu family didn't know, but he did? How did the Thug Patriarch get to the Divine Palace? Did he also go up from the God's Memorial Tower? But no. Han Fei had always felt that the way the Thug Patriarch and the others entered the Divine Palace should be through the star beads in their hands. This was also the reason why these star beads couldn't be given to the 7 major sects and the big clans. Of course, this was also the reason why the big clans had been coveting and suppressing the Thug Academy. If the Thug Patriarch entered the Divine Palace from the God's Memorial Tower, what was the use of the nautical panorama? Han Fei didn't think the Thug Patriarch could get lost in billions of possibilities. Thinking of this, Han Fei frowned. The identity of the Thug Patriarch was not simple, but he had never investigated the origin of the Thug Academy. He would have to ask him about this in the future. Leaving Chen Guzi aside, Wang Santai got into Han Fei's soundproof array. Wang Santai said, "Brother, I have a guess." "Well, should we?" Han Fei finally understood the characteristics of these people. In the past, he had only met Wang Santai who was like this, but today he met 3 of them at once. Han Fei said grumpily, "Tell me the truth first and then give me the money. As long as it makes sense, I'll get the money." Wang Santai said, "Brother, as soon as I saw you, I felt close to you. From your question, I know that you are different from ordinary people. Get to the point." Wang Santi's eyelids twitched. "Brother Han, this is not the first time we've done business. You can choose not to trust anyone, but can you not trust us?" Han Fei's eyes flickered. "Interesting. Are you sure it's me?" Wang Santi's heart skipped a beat. "Oh Mom, is it really you? I was just testing you." Although many people had told him to get to the point, only Han Fei's style was different. He looked as if he was going to beat someone up in the next second. Han Fei was not in a hurry but said lightly, "It doesn't matter if you recognize me. As long as your intelligence is valuable enough, you will get enough compensation." Wang Santai immediately took a breath and said, "There must be a trick to this God's Memorial Tower. In the God's Memorial Tower, when there are many mysterious and weird patterns, it means that each floor here is a checkpoint, and there is no key to each floor." Han Fei's eyes lit up. "Continue," Wang Santai said. "I suspect that the secret to passing the God's Memorial Tower is either in the Sky Meditation Garden's Forbidden Soul Space or in the Ideal Palace." Han Fei couldn't help asking, "Why do you think so?" Wang Santai explained, "The checkpoints in the God's Memorial Tower are like the Endless Tower in the Sky Meditation Garden. As for the Ideal Palace, we can't remember what's inside. But it's similar. As long as we return to the Ideal Palace, it should be clear." "Have you been to the Forbidden Soul Space?" Han Fei smiled. "That's a reasonable guess. However, I can't remember the situation in the Ideal Palace either. Doesn't it mean that I can't pass the God's Memorial Tower?" As he spoke, Han Fei turned the ring on his finger. In fact, when Han Fei left the Ideal Palace just now, he didn't feel that his memory was sealed. Was it the effect of the ring of time on his finger? Or was it because he refined the nautical globe? Anyway, he remembered it. In fact, this was reasonable. The existence of the Ideal Palace was always to explain something. If there was really no one, could he take out the memory inside? Then wouldn't he have forgotten about the navigational multitude instrument? Han Fei said, "Okay. That's more like it. Here's the spirit awakening fluid." With that said, Han Fei casually flipped his hand and took out 10 kilograms of spirit awakening fluid, which made Chun Guzi and Lu Yizi's eyes widen. However, Wang Santai secretly took 10 kilograms of spirit awakening fluid and then said, "Well, Brother Han, actually, this is not what I want to say." Han Fei asked, "Huh?" Wang Santai suddenly said, "Brother Han, can you strengthen the soundproof array?" Seeing that Wang Santai suddenly became serious, Han Fei immediately said, "There is a forbidden array here." Han Fei said, "Go ahead. At this moment, no one will hear what you say." Wang Santi's eyes were fiery. "Brother Han, just give me half a kilogram of spirit awakening fluid later. When you start to act, I have to run away." Han Fei said, "Go ahead." Wang Santai said, "First, the God's Memorial Tower is not absolutely safe. Someone can break in by force. You must hide your trace and never expose yourself." Han Fei was shocked. "Are you kidding me? The God's Memorial Tower is not absolutely safe?" Han Fei said calmly, "Go on." Wang Santai said, "Help me. If I tell you this, I have to run away. Can you help me go to the Scattered Stars Island?" Han Fei narrowed his eyes slightly. "You can go to the Scattered Stars Island by yourself. At that time, you can say that I asked you to go there. Someone will believe you." Second, asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1470. Han Fei threw half a kilogram of spirit awakening fluid to Wang Santai, but Wang Santai pretended to be frustrated, as if he didn't get Han Fei's approval. Seeing that Chinguzi still wanted to rush towards him, Han Fei shouted, "All right, I don't need your information anymore. Disperse." After that, Han Fei went straight to the floating stone and said to the old turtle, "Old Yuan, what do you think? Do you think this place is safe?" The old turtle said, "Just now when that man said it was not safe, he did not seem to be lying. This Empress swept through a few times just now and indeed felt that something was amiss." Han Fei narrowed his eyes. "Oh," the old tortoise said, "first of all, there are the old men who are doing research. Although their forms, auras, and communication methods are all different, they are all different from each other. However, this Empress sensed the same aura from their bodies. I'm afraid that these people have been tampered with." Calmly looking at the floating stone in front of him, Han Fei continued to ask, "Anything else wrong?" The old turtle said, If that kid hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have cared. The floating stones here seem to have been left with some kind of aura, which is extremely weak. Han Fei's eyes turned cold. Tracking? The old turtle said, I don't think so. This place was sealed by an expert. Even if a half-step monarch could tamper with this place, it was just like the rules of this place. The further one went, the more possibilities there were. No one could leave a mark on every layer of levitating stone. Otherwise, wouldn't the skeleton from a few years ago have long been exposed? Hearing this explanation, Han Fei was slightly relieved. That was the correct explanation. If the god's memorial tower had already been monitored, how could it have waited for him to arrive? It had probably been broken a long time ago. What Han Fei needed to confirm now was, how many floors would the mark be on? Old Yuan, can you help me remember how many layers of that person's mark is spread? I really don't believe that someone could lay down hundreds of millions of seals just to trick people. For Han Fei now, he had to find the limit of the old schemer's mark first. Once he found his limit, he could casually walk down 7 or 8 floors. Regardless of whether it was correct or not, the old man would definitely not be able to find him. At that time, as long as he could temporarily avoid his sight and enter a deeper level, he wouldn't have to worry about being found by old Monster Chew. The old turtle said, Actually, you can purify this power yourself. Don't forget, you have the apocalyptic divine art, which is especially good at dealing with these miscellaneous imprint remnants. Han Fei asked in surprise, Can it be suppressed? The old tortoise sneered. It would be strange if you couldn't restrain yourself when you're covered in holy radiance. However, if you make a move now, I'm afraid that the other party will make the first move and gain the upper hand. Han Fei sneered. I'm not that stupid. Come, let's try it out first. In Forge the Universe, the myriad manifestations instrument was running. Han Fei thought, Tell me the direction. Crack, crack, crack. The panorama rotated a few times, and the arrow was aimed in the direction of the floating stairs. As soon as Han Fei stepped onto the floating stone steps, he felt that the space around him was twisted, and he seemed to be able to crawl into this space. This should be what Wang Santai and the others were talking about. Every step was a path. Behind each step there were countless paths. Han Fei didn't go into the void cave. There were 32 steps on this floor of the Penrose stairs. Han Fei took a step and paused for about 2 minutes. When he walked to the 12th step, in Forge the Universe, the myriad manifestations instrument stopped spinning and pointed at him. Han Fei chuckled in his heart. Others have countless choices, but he only has one choice on each floor. According to Chunguzi, the most powerful person could only reach the 98th floor. That meant that it would take him at most 33 days to surpass that person. Besides, the path he was taking was absolutely the right one. Han Fei only planned to use the myriad manifestations instrument 3 times a day. As for the side effect, he didn't want to experience it even once. However, he had already used the myriad manifestations instrument twice today. Plus this time, it happened to be the 3rd time. However, Han Fei didn't stop his pace. Although the myriad manifestations instrument couldn't be used, Han Fei could enter a deeper level and use it to confuse the one who left the mark. Han Fei climbed 12 steps and didn't enter the void cave until he reached the 21st step. The old tortoise said immediately, Here, a mark has also been left. Han Fei glanced at it. On this floor, there were only 12 blocks, a typical Penrose triangle. Han Fei walked on this triangular floating stone. As it turned out, this geometric triangle was infinite and the road was endless. No matter how many times he walked, he would eventually return to the starting point. However, except for the 24 useless surfaces, each of the other surfaces would produce a space cave. In other words, there were 54 choices on this second floor. Excluding the choice he made when he came here, it meant that there were a total of 53 choices on this second floor. Han Fei returned to the first floor, chose another space cave, and crawled in. The result was the same, they were all triangles. Han Fei felt that his blood was freezing. This meant that every levitating stone on the first floor had 53 possible paths that were exactly the same for the user to choose from. If someone reached the third floor, they would probably be scratching their head. Damn it, is this something a human should do? Han Fei explored frantically. On the third floor, the old tortoise said, "There is a mark." On the fourth floor, the old tortoise said, "There is a mark." On the fifth floor, the old tortoise said, "There is a mark." In fact, when Han Fei jumped up and down in the cave randomly, it was not until he reached the sixth floor that the old tortoise said, "There is no mark here." He tried dozens of times in a row, even on the sixth floor, but didn't find any mark. Han Fei let out a long sigh of relief. However, then Han Fei's face became extremely ugly. Damn it, if I'm not mistaken, this damn God's Memorial Tower has been marked more than 600 million times. Han Fei had to admire this man's perseverance. How could he do such a thing? Did he bury so many marks just to ambush people? If he didn't pay attention and found the right way but didn't find these marks, he would be tracked on each floor until he passed. Outside the God's Memorial Tower, in the void shadow, someone shook his head slightly. Han Fei was walking randomly, without any pattern. However, he wouldn't let it go. Because Han Fei had walked out of the sixth floor several times, and even walked to the eighth floor once. Unfortunately, those should just be Han Fei's probing, not the real route. This person was also slightly surprised. Did Han Fei not know what to do? Did the people of the Thug Academy really not know what to do? On the first day, Han Fei almost spent all his time walking and exploring. On the second day, Han Fei explored as far as the 12th floor. Fortunately, the mark under Han Fei's feet didn't disappear, otherwise the person in the void would have taken action. On the third day, Han Fei still wandered in the first 10 floors and finally returned to the first floor. On the fourth day, Han Fei cultivated on the first floor and activated the yin-yang divine eyes. After passing through various void caves nearly 10,000 times, he still returned to the first floor. By the fifth day, the person hidden in the void was almost losing confidence, thinking that Han Fei might not be able to find the way to the depths. But as a result, just at the end of the day, when Han Fei was on the 5th floor, he suddenly broke out. A terrifying and dazzling pillar of holy light enveloped the whole area. At that moment, Han Fei's figure rushed into a void cave and disappeared. In an instant, outside the God's Memorial Tower, in the void, a strong figure instantly descended. With a tough stance, he tried to take down Han Fei. He followed Han Fei and directly broke into the 6th floor, not slow at all. The 7th floor, the 8th floor. The mark on the 5th floor was purified by Han Fei, and Han Fei rushed all the way to the 8th floor. Crack! All of a sudden, a big hand instantly grabbed Han Fei. An old voice said, "Humph, Han Fei, you little brat. I told you, since you've fallen out with me, don't think about coming to my 1,000-star city in the future. Do you think that you'll be able to bluff your way out of this old man's hands with your little cleverness?" Han Fei, who was caught, didn't panic at all. Instead, he chuckled. "Old Monster Chew, it's really you. Unfortunately, today, you're wrong." Han Fei's body collapsed in an instant and disappeared without a trace in an instant. This made Old Monster Chew's heart skip a beat. This person turned out to be a fake? And the real Han Fei was now standing on the correct 8th floor. Huff. When the Gemini became one, Han Fei took a deep breath. Fortunately, although they were in different spaces, the space did not affect the use of the Gemini divine technique. At this moment, Han Fei stretched out his hand, and the nautical panorama appeared in his hand. He stood still, and after more than 10 minutes, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Next floor. Han Fei had already calculated the time. He entered the 11th floor, stepped into a space cave on the 12th floor, and sat cross-legged. Han Fei thought to himself, if Old Monster Chew still has the ability to find me, then I'll be doomed. In fact, from the 5th floor to the 12th floor, although there were only 7 floors between them, there were billions of choices. Even if the gods were alive, if they walked this god's memorial tower according to the rules, they would probably cry. The old turtle said, "Don't worry. If I don't know the route, even I will get lost, let alone a mere half-king." Han Fei smiled gently. "I have to say that the big families are really difficult to deal with. If it weren't for Wang Santi's reminder, I would have almost fallen into their trap. In the future, the Chu sect will definitely be destroyed." The 3rd chapter. Give me a monthly ticket. Moi end of this chapter. Chapter 1471. On the 12th floor, Han Fei waited for a whole day. When Han Fei returned to the 11th floor, he didn't find the mark of a strong master. So, Han Fei quickly pointed out the entrance to the next 3 floors with the Universal Observatory. When Han Fei reached the 14th floor, no matter how strong old Monster Chu was, it would be impossible for him to explore these hundreds of millions of paths at once. Speaking of which, Han Fei actually helped old Monster Chu. After all, the first 5 floors that Han Fei walked through were absolutely correct paths. Logically speaking, just the path to the first 5 floors would have saved old eccentric Chu and the others hundreds of millions of choices. 2 months later, Han Fei had walked through the 212th floor in this god's memorial tower. Even so, this path still didn't end. It was conceivable that unless there was violent destruction or a divine artifact like the Universal Observatory, it was impossible for ordinary people to have such terrifying computing power to calculate the correct path. Han Fei couldn't help but complain. So many floors should be enough, right? If he went on like this, even if he had the Universal Observatory, he would almost collapse. What are these things in front of me? Penrose stairs, Penrose triangle, Mobius ring, Klein bottle. Perhaps these patterns weren't called like this. There were even some patterns that Han Fei couldn't name at all. Was this just a coincidence? Did Han Fei encounter these wonderful patterns by coincidence? On this day, after using the Universal Observatory, Han Fei walked to the 212th floor and stopped. In Han Fei's opinion, this thing didn't let him go. He didn't have the ability to go. Every day after using the Universal Observatory, he would sit down cross-legged, either to cultivate or to think. However, now he was already half a venerable and couldn't improve any further. If it weren't for the half-drop of source water in the Divine Palace, which could increase the possibility of his improvement, Han Fei could even become a venerable on the Scattered Stars Island. However, now Han Fei knew that the stronger he was, the more profound his foundation would be. After becoming a venerable, his strength would be completely different. Therefore, even if he had to suppress it, he would have to wait until he got that half-drop of source water. At this moment, Han Fei sat down cross-legged and took out a fish skin map in his hand. On the fish skin map, the numbers leading to the next floor of this god's memorial tower were recorded. After filling in the 3 numbers, Han Fei couldn't help but scratch his head and laugh at himself. "I'm afraid this thing has no pattern at all. There is no connection between these numbers." The old tortoise said, "You are already quite good, you only need to remember these numbers. This further proves that the navigation instrument you obtained is extraordinary. It also means that you have a deep relationship with the so-called Immortal Palace." In fact, the only thing that puzzled Han Fei was that he went to the Zhang family to steal the 7th level of the true spirit fishing art. In the end, he accidentally stole an entire floor's worth of treasure. After stealing a layer of treasures, he inadvertently obtained this black pearl. Perhaps the Zhang family also didn't know what the black pearl was used for. Therefore, he had always put it on the shelf. In the end, he had benefited from it. From the beginning to the end, the Zhang clan had no idea what a great opportunity they had missed. Han Fei looked bored and lay on the floating stone. Suddenly, the old turtle said, "Han Fei, actually, these patterns are not completely meaningless. I think it's just that you haven't understood these powers yet." Han Fei tilted his head. "Do you understand?" The old turtle said leisurely, "None of these patterns are normal. However, in the void world, nothing is impossible." "I didn't think so before. Have you noticed that these patterns are like some kind of array?" Han Fei chuckled. "Of course. As early as when I was on the first floor, I thought of this possibility. But, what's the point of such an array? Is it used to create an infinite loop maze? Even if these patterns are combined with each other, it will only add a few more confusion points to the loop maze. If it is changed into a killing array, it will work." Han Fei talked with a smile. However, as he smiled, his face suddenly stiffened up. A killing array? If a killing array was circular and endless, there would be no loss of power, and the energy would only dissipate and be reused within a specified range. Then, this killing array would be infinite. Hiss! Han Fei got up with a grunt. Assuming that it was feasible to use a killing array, then what he needed to consider now was, if he carved a single array, how could he trap people in it? The old turtle said, "What did you think of?" Han Fei said, "You have a point. These patterns may not be patterns. They may just be an array. It's just that this array has not been activated. Perhaps the entire God's Memorial Tower is a big killing array." Han Fei's eyes lit up. Logically speaking, perhaps this God's Memorial Tower was the only way to the central holy city. However, it might be the only bridge to protect the central holy city. If the God's Memorial Tower was a big array, then this array could definitely be called an earth-shattering one. Since ancient times, this array ranked first among the tens of thousands of arrays. Han Fei was stunned for a long time and then smiled bitterly. Even if this was indeed an array, how could he draw it? How long would it take to draw such a large-scale array? At this moment, Han Fei was a little amazed by the power of the Immortal Palace. If this God's Memorial Tower was really an array, then how strong would he be? Even if tens of millions of array masters set up arrays together according to a certain pattern, who knew how long it would take to set up such a huge array? He thought for a day, but to no avail. The next day, with a thought, the nautical panorama appeared in Han Fei's hand. As Han Fei chanted in his heart, after walking 15 steps along the floating stone, the pointer turned to him. Without hesitation, Han Fei crawled into the space crack that popped out next to him. However, as soon as he entered, the scene in front of him stunned him. In front of him was a road that had no end in sight. One could not see the end of this path, as if it was covered by a thin mist. The road was about 1 kilometer wide, and there seemed to be houses of various colors on both sides. The moment Han Fei appeared on this road, he saw the shallow fog on the road quickly began to dissipate. Han Fei's vision became clearer. In just a moment, the fog dissipated, and Han Fei seemed to see. At the end of his vision, there was a temple standing. "Who?" Han Fei immediately took a breath. "Am I here?" Han Fei looked back, only to see a tall tower that covered an area of nearly 100 meters and stood almost 1,000 meters high in the sky. On the body of the tower, there were uneven square stones scattered all over the place. Under the tower there was a dark doorway. Therefore, the God's Memorial Tower had always been a name in the central holy city. Why did the outside world know the name God's Memorial Tower? God knew. Maybe they were used to calling it that. It was the first time that Han Fei had seen such a magnificent scene. There was no such wide road in the entire 1,000-star city that led so far. Han Fei was not a fool. He didn't dare to move a step. After all, it was said that in this central holy city, there was a city protection array. The array was so powerful that it could even kill a venerable. Han Fei looked down at the ground. The bluish-white stones were glimmering and seemed to contain a lot of spiritual energy. However, there was no trace of an array. Han Fei was shocked. "Is a brick in this central holy city so valuable?" Han Fei asked. "Old Yuan, can you feel the remnants of an array here?" The old turtle immediately said, "You may not believe it. I seem to be suppressed by the mysterious power in this city. I can't release my perception at all. Han Fei immediately gave it a try. In the end, it was just as the old tortoise had said. His own perception could not be released. In that case, was there a formation here or not? What kind of array was there? He couldn't feel it at all. Just when Han Fei was about to walk forward to see what was going on, the scene in front of his eyes suddenly changed. First, there was a thunderbolt that struck directly at his body. Han Fei's face changed slightly, but he didn't stop it. If this was just the power of lightning, it wouldn't be a difficult array to walk through. Boom! Boom! After 100 strikes in a row, Han Fei felt a scorching pain. Han Fei found that the power of this lightning was comparable to that of an ordinary minor lightning tribulation. This was much stronger than the lightning in the so-called Thunder Prison. If one had to compare them, they might even be stronger than the lightning prison 5,000 miles away from the White Shell Royal City. Of course, for Han Fei now, this lightning was nothing. However, after the lightning, there was a sea of fire. Han Fei could cross dozens of kilometers with a step. However, in this place, space seemed to be meaningless. He seemed to be trapped in an invisible array. There was no distance, no time, only nothingness. F***ck, did I run into the 8 trigrams alchemy furnace? The old turtle said, this array appeared too fast. Logically speaking, it was impossible. Even if you can't detect it, I can't be unaware of it. So, I thought it could wrap you up, but there is only one possibility. Han Fei scoffed. What time is it? Why are you still keeping me guessing? The old turtle said, this whole city is a big array. You are already in the array, so there is nowhere to escape. Han Fei gritted his teeth. Although I'm not afraid of fire, such a big array, Han Fei didn't continue. He suddenly remembered one thing. In the heavenly desolation city, the city that lasted on the sea for more than 200 years, if it relied solely on manpower, it would have been destroyed a long time ago. Human beings had strong masters, but the sea clans did have strong masters. At that time, the heavenly desolation city had a city protection array. Even at the last moment, the city protection array was broken with great difficulty. At this time, Han Fei thought of the heavenly desolation city. So, was the central holy city he was in called the Thousand-Star City? Or did it have an independent name? Chapter 1472. Inexplicably, Han Fei was caught in a series of arrays. Because there was no concept of space here, Han Fei couldn't figure out how to break the arrays. Han Fei was even a little surprised. Who set up arrays like this? If you're going to set up an array, it should be a series of tightly linked arrays to lure people into the trap, right? Who the hell set up a killing array at the entrance? Unless this intersection was not used as a passage at all, but only to kill those from the Thousand-Star City. The fire was roaring, but Han Fei didn't feel it at all. Because on Han Fei's shoulder, Little Black was swallowing almost all the fire energy. Did they want to burn Han Fei? It didn't seem possible at the moment. It seemed that the fire array was useless. In the next moment, a dense swarm of arrows that resembled a swarm of locusts appeared out of nowhere. They were darting at Han Fei. F***ck me. Is this how you jump between formations? Han Fei quickly put away Little Black, and with a thought, 2 kitchen knives appeared in his hands. Han Fei moved up and down in the waves like a snake. In the array of arrows that were as fast as lightning, he turned into endless shadows. Clang, 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 clang. After almost 100 minutes, Han Fei stepped on the defense array and slashed with Snowmorn in his hand. Sword Chi soared into the sky. The power of this slash was comparable to that of a peak-level junior venerable. After entering the central holy city, Han Fei's power returned. However, his perception seemed to be trapped by an array and couldn't get out for the time being. Han Fei activated the power of Tao and increased his strength to that of a venerable, trying to break the array by force. However, as soon as he slashed out with the sword drawing technique, he saw a weird big mirror appear. The sword-drawing technique that Han Fei slashed out was slashed back intact. Shoot! Han Fei was shocked. Is this a spatial array? Han Fei didn't dare to hesitate. He slashed again, causing the void to shake and air waves to surge. Thousands of sword lights melted into the wind and slashed in all directions. Han Fei's expression changed slightly. An array that can change space, similar to the array in the God's Memorial Tower? Old Yuan, can't you release your perception at all? Without perception, I can't find the array base. Han Fei didn't dare to attack again. The more powerful his attack was, the more the enemy would send it back to him with a weird array. It wasn't that the formation was strong. However, his perception was sealed, and he couldn't find where the formation was. Otherwise, he wouldn't have allowed this killing formation to be activated. The old turtle said, "This Emperor's perception has also been suppressed. It seems like this space is suppressed indiscriminately. Is there a problem with your entrance?" While Han Fei and the old turtle were having a heated discussion, a knife shadow with a 1,000-meter-long spiral came at them. Judging from the surging power of the blade, Han Fei knew that it was no less powerful than his sword-drawing technique. Han Fei thought to himself, "I can't be suppressed like this." His forceful methods were unable to break through, but the other party was able to break through? That didn't make sense. Immediately, Han Fei said in his heart, space folding. The reason why his sword-drawing technique had been sent back just now was because the principle was the same. It was a bit like the principle of reflection, but it was not. It was like folding a piece of paper in half, so the attack that was blasted out would return to the original point along the fold. And the space in front of Han Fei was like that piece of paper. Thanks to Han Fei's unique Tao, he could create something out of nothing in a small range and change his Tao unlimitedly. Otherwise, Han Fei wouldn't have been able to deal with such a spatial technique. When the knife light slashed back along the space, Han Fei heard someone exclaim, and the voice was very clear. "Who is it?" Han Fei's first reaction was that if there was someone here, it must be the controller of the Immortal Palace. Han Fei immediately shouted, "We're on the same side. Don't fight. Xiaozi asked me to come here. I've met the palace master. How about we cancel this array first?" Humph. Han Fei was wondering how to let this person know who he was and confirm his identity. How to tell him that he had no malicious intent. Han Fei was also wondering if he should take out the sea-quelling painting. However, swish, 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 the grand void formation gradually calmed down. The black color turned into a faint white. Immediately afterward, it began to become transparent and then disappeared. Is it really that easy? While Han Fei was still wondering, he saw a figure standing 100 meters away from him outside the disappearing array. 3 seconds later, when the void array completely dissipated, smack. Damn it, Han Fei slapped his thigh angrily and cursed. Great! It's fun, isn't it? I'm still a semi-venerable. The power of the array just now is enough to kill a venerable. How dare you attack me? Hey no, old Ren. You have to explain it to me this time. What the hell is going on? Why are you in the central holy city? Isn't this where the controller of the Immortal Palace stays? You? Han Fei complained. However, as he complained, Han Fei found that something was wrong. When Han Fei saw Ren Tianfei's faint smile, he swallowed and asked in shock, "Are you the controller of the Immortal Palace?" Han Fei's face immediately turned awful. No one had ever investigated Ren Tianfei's background. Because Xiao Ci was ambushed, it could be said that the entire Thousand-Star City didn't necessarily know that there was a controller in the central holy city. Except for families like the Chu sect and the Chao family, other families didn't necessarily know the existence of the Immortal Palace. Even if there were people who knew about the so-called controller's identity, there were probably only a handful of people. Before, Han Fei thought that Ren Tianfei was a top expert in the Thousand-Star City. In the end, for some reason, he had conflicts with the big clans in the Thousand-Star City. Later, He was hunted by the big clans and hid in the sea area of the Heavenly Water Village in the Blue Sea Town to recover from his wound. Later, this genius created his own body-refining technique, reached the peak again, and returned to the Thousand Star City for revenge. Han Fei had thought that the story should be so simple. But later, the reason why Ren Tianfei was hunted was because he had been to the Immortal Palace? At that time, Han Fei even thought that Ren Tianfei was a heavenly talent. Only a real heavenly talent could stand out from hundreds of millions of people and go to the place that everyone wanted to go but couldn't. But now that he thought about it, it was hilarious, too hilarious. A venerable level expert was beaten to death? He went to a small mantis shrimp cave in the Heavenly Water Village and ate a few mantis shrimps, and he thought he could save his life? How stupid could he be? How could he believe such absurd words? In fact, when Ren Tianfei and old Han joined hands, Han Fei had already guessed it. However, he didn't think about it because he would rather be fooled. Now, Ren Tianfei had become the controller of the Immortal Palace. What else could he say? The entire Thousand Star City probably thought that Ren Tianfei and old Han allied because the big clans in the Thousand Star City were powerful. That was why they allied and helped each other. However, his mother was the master of the Immortal Palace. How could old Han and Ren Tianfei not know each other? If old Han and Ren Tianfei knew each other a long time ago, then the indestructible body was actually their schemer from the beginning to the end. From Ren Tianfei to old Han, they were all king liars. Hey, wait, Han Fei was thinking, why did I include the Thug Academy in this? Han Fei raised his eyelids, looked at Ren Tianfei, and gnashed his teeth. Who is the Thug Patriarch? If the controller was Ren Tianfei, then it was only natural that Ren Tianfei could go to the Immortal Palace. This God's Memorial Tower shouldn't be difficult for him either. However, why could the Thug Patriarch also go to the God's Memorial Tower? Ren Tianfei, old Han, and the Thug Academy were all on the same path now. Now, Ren Tianfei's identity was basically revealed. Then, what about the Thug Academy? The Thug Patriarch once dominated the Thousand Star City, and old Bai often bragged about it to them. Now that he thought about it, it didn't seem right. The Thug Patriarch was hunted by the big clans because he had been to the Immortal Palace. The reason was the same as Ren Tianfei's. What if he believed it? Then there must be something wrong with his IQ. The corners of Ren Tianfei's mouth curled up slightly. Are you curious? Do you think everyone has lied to you? Han Fei curled his lips. Why? Am I wrong? Since you all have such powerful backgrounds, why don't you just open the way for me and let me go directly to the Immortal Palace? Didn't you open the way for me? Ren Tianfei sneered. Who opened the way for you? From the beginning of your cultivation, from the fishing trial, to entering the Thug Academy, to the Level 3 fishery, to the Scattered Stars Island. During this period, who opened the way for you? With his hands behind his back, Ren Tianfei walked on this broad road. Even if it was for the sea-quelling painting, did I help you get it? It's only in the Thousand Star City that we'll save you. Your father and I helped you, but that's because the power was beyond your ability. Otherwise, who do you think would have helped you? Han Fei gritted his teeth. It made sense. When Xia Shaochan was taken away by Chun Huangdian, none of these B***stards helped. Even when he was killed by Chun Huangdian on the spot, old Jiang couldn't find him after searching for days and nights. But these B***stards still didn't help. Immediately, Han Fei's heart trembled a little. Just because of the road to becoming a king? He thought that after he took over the Scattered Stars Island and presided over the first battle, he would become a chess player from then on. But now it seemed that this was not the case at all. Ren Tianfei said, "Don't think about that. From now on, my identity has been revealed. The rest of the road is up to you. Don't you want to know who Immortal Li is? Come on, let me tell you." Chapter 1473. It was the first time that Han Fei and Ren Tianfei had met. It could be said that he had never seen a real person before. It was either a clone or a puppet. This should be the real body without a doubt. If Ren Tianfen was the controller, then his strength couldn't be weak. At least in the central holy city, he had to be strong enough. Besides here, he didn't need to hide his strength. Han Fei stepped to Ren Tianfen's side. The two walked on this long street a few meters apart. Han Fei glanced at the buildings on both sides of the road that should have been dusty for a long time but were still brand new, and wondered, no one lives here, right? Creak. As soon as Han Fei said so, he saw a door on the side of the road not far away, which opened from the inside. Han Fei cursed in his heart. How many tens of thousands of years has it been? Are there still people living in the central holy city? However, when Han Fei saw the appearance of the person inside, he was shocked again. Isn't that Ren Tianfen? He scanned the person with his perception and found that the person was actually an explorer. Before Han Fei spoke, Ren Tianfen said, "This city is so big that someone has to live here. I can't live here alone. After all, I can't have endless clones." Han Fei couldn't help asking, "Then how many clones do you have?" Han Fei felt that this should be Ren Tianfen's path. Otherwise, he had never seen a venerable using a clone to fight all the time. Ren Tianfei said, "It's okay if you want 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 of them. It's just that the power of different clones is different. It depends on when and how to use it." Han Fei asked Path. Ren Tianfen grunted and said, "If it were a combat skill, I would have found a way to give it to you long ago." Han Fei rolled his eyes and then looked around. "Is this the central holy city? What's so special about it?" Ren Tianfen smiled. "Let's go up and have a look." With a shout from Ren Tianfen, the two stepped into the air one after another. When they came to a height of thousands of meters, the layout of the city had already taken shape. However, at this moment, he still couldn't see the entire appearance of the city. Further up, Han Fei saw a winding river in the shape of an S, running through the entire central holy city. On both sides of the river, on both sides of the middle line, there were two completely different architectural styles, black and white. Han Fei was a little dumbfounded. "Tai Chi?" Ren Tianfei asked, "What is Tai Chi?" "This is yin and yang." Oldman Ren blew his beard and said proudly, "The central holy city uses the inner square as the stars to nourish the fire energy of the mortal world. With Tianshui as the Milky Way, he placed two palaces in the city. With the divine temple as the Big Dipper, the yin and yang of the world converged. On the axis of the heaven character, the world's strongest sects were built. They were the Lunar Academy, the pure Yang Taoist Palace. These were the former Thousand Star City, the former yin-yang heaven." Hiss. Han Fei was a little stunned. "No. Oldman Ren, say something. I can understand." Ren Tianfei snorted. "A city has to be inhabited. If there were people living here, there would be people. If there was popularity, there would be governance, and there would be the birth of the power of will. You must have felt it when you fought on the Scattered Stars Island, right?" Han Fei nodded. "So, the central holy city was built to provide the power of will for the king?" Ren Tianfei shook his head. "Of course not. Under the rule of the king, there are billions of people. Those who can live in the central holy city are all extraordinary. How can everyone live here? This is just the backbone of the yin-yang heaven, which represents the level of power." Han Fei didn't dwell on this question but looked at the river and asked, "What about the river?" Ren Tianfei explained, "The clouds and rain form a river, and the spirit awakening fluid flows in the river. It can be called the Milky Way or the spiritual river. As for the specific name, it doesn't matter." Hiss. "The spirit awakening fluid flows in it?" Han Fei couldn't help but gasp. "Are you kidding me? How much spirit awakening fluid does it cost?" Ren Tianfei sneered. "What do you think the spirit awakening fluid is? It is nourished by the Tao of the king and contains the enlightenment of the king. Everything can be awakened by the king's aura. Forget it, you won't understand it even if I tell you." Anyway, all you need to know is that the spirit awakening fluid is not valuable. Once you become a king, you can have as much as you want. Han Fei asked, then what's the matter with the yin-yang diagram? The Lunar Academy and the Pure Yang sect are the two strongest sects in the world on the axis. Why don't the 7 major sects in the Thousand-Star City have them? Suddenly, Han Fei tilted his head and looked at Ren Tianfei. Is the Thug Academy the Lunar Academy or the Pure Yang sect? Ren Tianfei looked at Han Fei with a smile. Are you so sure that the Thug Academy is one of the 2 major academies? Han Fei curled his lips. If not, how could the patriarch of the Thug Academy pass the God's Memorial Tower? Why could he enter the Divine Palace? Han Fei sneered again. I used to wonder why the Thug Academy somehow became the top of the 8 major academies in the Thousand-Star City and was popular for a while. The Pure Yang Island, the Thug Academy, the Pure Yang sect. Haha, it turns out that this is the real origin of the Thug Academy. Ren Tianfei said casually, you're quite smart. Yes, the predecessor of the Thug Academy was indeed the Pure Yang sect. It used to be a revolution for thousands of years. In the end, the experts of the sect withered. The remaining people could only leave the central holy city and start recruiting like the 7 major sects. Han Fei couldn't help but wonder, isn't this how you recruited people before? Ren Tianfei glanced at Han Fei with a faint smile and asked, is this how you recruited people? Han Fei thought for a moment. That didn't seem right. Although they left the central holy city, the arrogance of the Thug Academy didn't diminish. For example, Lu Renquang, Zhang Xuanyu, Luo Xiaobai, Xia Shaochan. Which one of them was recruited? Only Chu Jinan and Ling Yuan were recruited from Chu Jinan's generation. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, what about the Lunar Academy? Ren Tianfei said indifferently, you should know that the yin-yang heaven was moved here later. At that time, the people of the central holy city followed the army and then scattered everywhere, never returning. The Lunar Academy was separated from the yin-yang heaven at that time. Where exactly is it? I don't know. Han Fei took a slight breath. In other words, the Lunar Academy had disappeared for tens of thousands of years? This was understandable. After all, during the Age of Doom, there were indeed battles everywhere. Some people disappeared in the middle of the war. This should be normal. Besides, after the establishment of the 36 immortal palaces, there must have been many battles. Where were these people left? Did they still remember the yin-yang heaven? It was the same question. Looking at the city occupied only by Ren Tianfei's clone, Han Fei thought to himself, how many years has this old guy lived? Han Fei shrugged and said casually, so, what should I do now? Should I go to the temple or go directly to the immortal palace? Ren Tianfei smiled faintly. Me. You can't go anywhere. Even if I'm blessed with great luck, I have to experience it in person. I'd like to see if you are qualified to enter the immortal palace. Han Fei immediately bared his teeth and said angrily, old man, you still want to fight me? Why don't you save your strength to fight the puppets in the immortal palace? I heard that there are puppets everywhere in the immortal palace. Ren Tianfei sneered. You have more than 80% of the good things in the world. I have to make it more difficult for you, right? Are you going to fight me or not? If you beat me, you can go to the immortal palace. Han Fei sneered. Fine. Do you think I'm afraid of you? You have an indestructible body, but I have also cultivated a golden body. I'd like to see how you can stop me in the same realm. Ren Tianfei's eyelids twitched slightly. Indestructible golden body. Not bad. But who said I would fight you in the same realm? Han Fei. Ren Tianfei released his aura and unleashed the power of a mid-level venerable. Han Fei was shocked. Didn't Xiao Ci say that the power of the controller had dropped a lot? She said that he was at least a beginner venerable, but, besides, Ren Tianfei was only a mid-level venerable. Could he be trusted? Anyway, Han Fei absolutely didn't believe it. Even if Ren Tianfei was a mid-level venerable, He was still a mid-level venerable who could break into the Thousand-Star City on his own. What was the difference between him and a half-king? Han Fei's face immediately turned dark. Hey, hey, hey! Old Ren, let's talk nicely. Don't bully me like this. I haven't become a venerable yet, and you want to play with me like this? You're bullying me. Ren Tianfei chuckled. The strength you showed in the battle on the Scattered Stars Island was not weak at all. Facing an advanced venerable? Half-King realm experts didn't give way at all. What? You want to admit defeat before the fight? Bullsh *T. Even a half-venerable has its limit. You always summon a mid-level venerable and then an advanced venerable. Who do you think you're bullying? Ren Tianfei suggested. Why don't you go to the temple and feel the power of the future throne? Maybe you'll have the motivation to defeat me. Han Fei had never been provoked like this before. He immediately shouted, Come on, let's fight now. I don't believe you can defeat me. You're just a mid-level venerable. Do you think you can beat me? Bam! Han Fei punched out. The invincible fist mark hit the void. The two of them fought in the void one after the other. Chapter 1474. The battle between Han Fei and Ren Tianfen was simply a feast full of violent aesthetics. At first, when the two of them first fought, Han Fei habitually dodged with all kinds of techniques. He used the desolate god body and the various body techniques of the 64-dimensional fish dragon dance. The reason why he fought like this was that Han Fei was still a little traumatized. After all, Ren Tianfen had specially trained him for 2 months. At that time, he was still in the level 3 fishery and was beaten miserably every day. Therefore, knowing Ren Tianfen's style, he certainly wouldn't let him find any flaws. Otherwise, it would not be easy for him to turn the tables when the punches came one after another without any chance to catch his breath. However, after Han Fei used all these methods, Ren Tianfei's strength suddenly rose to the advanced venerable realm with a swish. Han Fei immediately cursed, Shameless old man, you're cheating. Ren Tianfen's voice was like thunder. I'm cheating? I just want to teach you one thing, and that is, a single person can defeat 10 people. So many fancy tricks. When you meet a real expert, are you going to rely on these tricks to fight? Han Fei sneered. Old man, I not only have these tricks but also the strongest body. Come on. BM. With a thought, Han Fei activated the Great Way, increased his strength by 3 times, and suddenly jumped to the level of a junior venerable. Although there was still a gap between him and Ren Tianfen, he had the indestructible golden body, so he could still fight. At this time, the two of them punched each other, depending on who was faster and fiercer. Their styles and methods were indeed quite similar. Han Fei's strength at this time was at the level of a junior venerable. Of course, he couldn't compare with Ren Tianfen. At most, he could exert the power of an intermediate venerable at most, and most of his moves were still stuck at the level of a beginner venerable. Han Fei was no longer able to increase his strength. Han Fei had a hunch that if he forcibly used his power of the Great Way, he wouldn't be able to have 4 times the strength. Otherwise, it would be too unbelievable. Bam, bam, bam. In the blink of an eye, Han Fei had been punched dozens of times. Every punch made Han Fei's internal organs tremble. It was really not a solution to go on like this. However, in terms of style, it was really Ren Tianfen's style. Roar! Han Fei roared and activated the 100 Beasts' soul-suppressing roar. A layer of golden light appeared on his body and enveloped him. Hey, stinking brat! This time, I'll tell you that living a long life isn't without its benefit. In terms of the power of the divine soul, you can't be considered a top prodigy. At the same level, my soul power is about twice as strong as yours. Bang! Han Fei felt that his spirit was about to explode, and his eyes, nose, and mouth were bleeding. Han Fei gritted his teeth and grunted. With the help of the invincible will, golden fist marks smashed down like a storm. While bombarding, Han Fei asked, the longer you live, the stronger your soul will be. How high can it go? Ren Tianfei didn't give in at all. He fought back with his fists and punched out 7 or 8 big fist marks that were as powerful as the sacrificing punch, blowing Han Fei dozens of kilometers away. Ren Tianfei said, "That's not accurate. Not everyone could keep improving their divine soul power. In order to improve one's soul power, one needed to dig out one's own body's potential. The deeper one dug, the stronger the container of the divine soul would be. The other was to keep using the visualization diagram for a long time. The more advanced the visualization diagram is, the better the spiritual power can be improved, but there will be a limit." As he spoke, Han Fei had returned with a stellar passage technique. The two of them bombarded each other again. The two of them fought and blood splashed. But how much skill did they need? You might not be able to tell, but it was like two drunkards fighting each other. The two of them fought back and forth, and Han Fei lost more than he won. Han Fei said, "The second half of the indestructible body art should be to integrate the power of the soul into the body of flesh and blood. Merging the two is the ultimate way of the indestructible body art, isn't it?" Ren Tianfei laughed and said, "You're quite smart, kid. As you said, you've already comprehended the cultivation method of the indestructible body art. First of all, your body must be indestructible, and in fact, your soul must be indestructible. If you want your soul to be indestructible, the best way is to hide it in any corner of your body." Seizing the opportunity, Han Fei took Ren Tianfei's punch head-on. With a smile, he punched out and blew Ren Tianfei back 100 meters. Swallowing a mouthful of blood, Han Fei gasped. "Your method seems to have scattered my brain and integrated it into every corner of my body. Are you saying that my whole body is full of brains?" Ren Tianfei sneered. "I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Your current physical strength is indeed not weak. Now that you've embarked on the invincible realm, you're even stronger. However, although your soul power may be about twice as much as ordinary people's, this part of the soul power can be made up for through persistent cultivation, visualization, and long-term cultivation. However, this part of the soul power can be made up for through persistent cultivation, visualization, and long-term cultivation. Therefore, anyone can do it. Therefore, the power of your divine soul is not the most top-notch kind. If you have a chance in the future, go find more ownerless souls." Bam! 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 Their fists collided and they both retreated thousands of meters. Han Fei took a breath and said, "The ownerless souls can be killed by venerables, but how strong is the soul?" Ren Tianfei said leisurely, "Everyone's limit is different. You shouldn't ask me about this. You should ask yourself. If you don't know how strong your soul power is now, it's not a big problem. In the future, find your Taoist heart. What is the great path in your heart? Where is your great path? How should you walk on it? The Taoist heart ultimately determines the limit of the soul." Han Fei's pupils suddenly constricted. This was the first time that he had heard someone else talk about the Taoist heart apart from the old turtle. In Han Fei's body, the old turtle said, "Han Fei, look, this is the difference. This old guy knows the meaning of the Taoist heart. You're the only one who's always chasing after increasing your strength. In fact, you are improving too fast. Even if you don't think about the Taoist heart now, when you become a venerable, do you want to become a king? If your Taoist heart is not strong enough, it won't work." Han Fei calmly asked Ren Tianfei, "What is the Taoist heart?" Ren Tianfei was accumulating power, and terrifying energy was gathering on his fist. "The Taoist heart, the Taoist heart. There is nothing to worry about, and there is nothing to fear on the road ahead. Find your own meaning of life, walk on the only great path that can let you walk until you die, be firm and never give up, that is the Taoist heart." Hearing Ren Tianfei's explanation, Han Fei thought to himself. The old turtle couldn't help but say, "I have to say that you human beings are really eloquent. That's pretty much it, but you must not take what he said as the standard. What he said is all right. However, the Tao heart is far more complicated than these few sentences. After hearing Ren Tianfei's explanation and the old turtle's advice, Han Fei actually understood these truths. However, did he want Han Fei to have an unwavering Taoist heart now? Han Fei really couldn't do that for the time being. The key was that old Han and the others had paved the road for too long. Han Fei's own growth had been completely planned by them. Especially after he learned all this, he felt very upset and lost the sense of accomplishment he had before. However, it would be a lie to say that Han Fei didn't have any faith. Han Fei still had a lot of things to do. First of all, he had to find a way to cross the boundless sea, find the mermaids, beat up Chun Huangdian, and take Xia Shaochan away. Han Fei felt that his idea was very domineering. Chun Huangdian, that B***starred, almost killed him back then. If he didn't get revenge, he wouldn't be able to get rid of the anger in his heart. As for the rest, was it really for the sake of the human race, for the sake of dealing with the Sea clan? Han Fei really didn't. In war, there was no right or wrong. However, in their respective worlds, right and wrong always existed. Sea demons weren't ruthless, nor were human beings sentient. It could only be said that he happened to be born in the human race, so he had to stand on the side of the human race. No matter what kind of creatures they were, they would unite in times of crisis, which was a common trait. Even if this principle was correct, didn't the human race also have people like the aristocratic families? They were more concerned about their own interests. Did he want them to risk their lives for the survival of the human race? That was just wishful thinking. At this moment, Han Fei thought to himself that maybe he should study how to nurture his so-called faith after he became a venerable. Half a day later, Han Fei and Ren Tianfen fought more than 3,000 rounds. Most importantly, Han Fei was beaten up. Han Fei was lost for words. Old B***starred, I think you're just making fun of me. Why don't you lower your strength and let's practice again? Ren Tianfen sneered. What do you think? I just want to beat you up a few more times before you become a king. If you really become a king in the future, I'm a man who has beaten a king before. Han Fei's eyelids twitched. So, you still don't think I can become a king, do you? Ren Tianfen glanced at Han Fei in disdain. You haven't even become a venerable yet. Is it appropriate to talk about being a king? What do you think a king is? You think you can become one just because you want to? Even the king's tribulation is extremely difficult. By the way, with your cultivation speed, I'm afraid you'll have to consider the king's tribulation after you become a venerable. Han Fei smiled. You have no experience in this. What about the king's tribulation? I'm afraid there is only one person in the entire Yin-Yang heaven who has experience in it. Han Fei was talking about Tang Yin. Han Fei felt that this guy was very unusual. In order to transcend the king's tribulation, he created a cloud whale clone. However, this clone failed to transcend the king's tribulation and was killed. Now, he didn't give up and created another cloud whale clone. Not only did he create a cloud whale clone, but he also wanted to transcend the king's tribulation this time. Even if he failed this time, he still had the identity of Tanggu. Han Fei sighed sincerely. In the world of the strong, it was really not easy to die. As the saying goes, a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. These people were not kings yet, but they had already created one reincarnation after another for themselves. Even Han Fei himself knew how the so-called reincarnation came about. As Ren Tianfen said, he could directly deprive part of his soul power and all his memories, stuff the pure memories into a brand new body, and let it grow naturally. Under the influence of the environment, he would gradually become a new strong master. Just thinking about it made Han Fei's blood freeze. Did he watch himself become another person? Then, in the end, he became himself again? Ren Tianfen suddenly rose, shook his messy hair, and said casually, Let's go to the temple and have a look. Be careful of the eye of the heavenly path. That thing can corrode the divine palace. Now you can kill all the puppets in the divine palace. Chapter 1475. The central holy city was a place where kings lived. Under normal circumstances, that temple was empty. Everyone in the central holy city knew that. According to Oldmanren, a long time ago, when it was most prosperous, the central holy city would be open to the thousand-star city once a year. At that time, tens of millions of humans could come to the central holy city to admire the miracles. After crossing the heavenly river, there was a temple in the center that looked a bit like a temple of heaven. There were a lot of stairs in all directions, and the circular temple was quite large. It was also a 3-story building. Han Fei couldn't help but wonder, why are they all 3 stories? Ren Tianfen was stunned for a moment. What else are 3 stories? Han Fei shook his head. Nothing. I mean, is this where I'm going to live? Ren Tianfen sneered. You're going to live here? Why don't you take a look at yourself? Do you have the nerve to live here? Han Fei said in disdain. Why would I have the nerve to live here? This is my territory after all. Ren Tianfen said proudly. The king's inheritance depends on who is capable. Everyone is paving the way for you, but you have to become a king first. Take Tang Yen for example. If he becomes a king before you and takes over the divine palace, this might be his. Han Fei looked at the sky and said, Isn't that thing still there? How can Tang Yen become a king? Ren Tianfen shrugged. That's the truth. If it weren't for that thing, do you think anyone would wait for you to become a king? Besides, since that thing can stop others from becoming kings, it might be able to stop you too. You have to be prepared for that. Han Fei said casually, I'm not in a hurry. I haven't become a venerable yet, so I can keep that thing for a while. When I become a half-king, I'll find a way to get it. In a sense, the Eye of the Heavenly Path bought time for Han Fei. If it weren't for the Eye of the Heavenly Path, people like Old Monster Chu, Old Han, the Thug Patriarch, and Tang Yen wouldn't have been able to become kings. The 2 of them entered the temple. The bottom floor of the temple was nearly 100 meters high, and there was only a statue of the sea god. However, unlike all the sea god statues that Han Fei had seen, this sea god statue here was sitting, very dignified and dignified. Also, in terms of demeanor and appearance, this was the first time that Han Fei had seen his mother when she was a king. The statue had shoulder-length hair that was slightly curled and fell to the back of its neck. The space between her eyebrows opened up, and a ray of golden light resembling a sword shot out. Her cheeks were slightly thin and angular, and she had the demeanor of an empress who ruled the world. Han Fei had seen his mother in the illusion of the sea-quelling painting before. However, at that time, she was just a beautiful woman, not a king at all. Ren Tianfei said, Few people can make it here to pay their respects. Han Fei frowned and said, King Qing, isn't it just cultivation? Why do you insist on paying your respects? Ren Tianfei smiled. You don't understand. Back in that era, the myriad races didn't have much confidence. The king was their belief, their hope. They gave all their faith to the king. Can you understand this feeling? In this case, if the king can still show his divine skills from time to time for all people to admire, as time goes by, people will gain confidence. Han Fei asked, How much power of faith do people need to admire? Ren Tianfei nodded. It's all mutual. The power of faith can help the king become stronger, and the king can enhance the confidence of all people. No one wins or loses here, but everyone makes a profit. The power of faith also has a limit. That's what your mother told me. What's the specific limit? I don't know. After all, not everyone can become a king. Han Fei and Ren Tianfei went to the second floor. As they walked, Han Fei asked, Can't one become a king without the power of faith? If you really want to put it that way, then in this boundless sea region, there are tens of thousands of races, but only a few kings can appear, right? Ren Tianfei said, Of course not. There was a difference between King Qing and King Qing. Some people walked the righteous path of heaven and earth, walking the path of grandeur. Becoming a king is just a beginning, a beginning. Some people become a king only because they have enough strength and opportunities and have passed the king's tribulation. If you want to go further, then you have to continue to fight and look for opportunities. Han Fei wondered, what's the difference? Ren Tianfei said, as the king of a clan, even if you sit and accept faith every day, you can eventually become a king. Do you know what it means to become a king? It's the realm after the king. Han Fei said, I know. Are you saying I can become a king by sitting down? Han Fei's heart trembled violently. Damn it, is there such a good thing in the world? It's already so difficult to become a king, but someone can become a king by sitting down? The old turtle's voice sounded in Han Fei's heart. How can there be such a good thing in the world? In fact, it's all the same. It's not so difficult to become a king, just because your domain is guarded by the Big Eye. Otherwise, there may have been more than one king by now. Even the old man in front of you can probably pass the king's tribulation. He said it's possible to become a king by sitting down. But think about it, how can a king who fights his way up be the same as a king who sits down? Han Fei felt that the old turtle had a point. Even if one could become a king by sitting down, it wouldn't be solid enough. That was a sovereign that was created from the power of will, so there was no reason for it to be stronger than the others who had fought their way up. However, the old turtle said again, of course there are benefits too. Not everyone could break through the heavens and become an emperor after becoming a king. Besides, such a king who walks on the path of faith can gather the faith of thousands of people in his own territory, which is indeed impressive. However, if he leaves his territory, his strength may be greatly reduced. Han Fei pondered for a moment. So this was the reason why the Life Queen and the others refused to leave their territory? As they walked, Han Fei saw that the second floor was in a mess, and there were many wine jars rolling randomly on the ground. Ren Tianfei said, well, I live on this floor. I don't have much to do. I just sleep, meditate and so on. Let's go to the third floor. The entrance to the Divine Palace is on the third floor. Han Fei was amused. He didn't expect that old Manrin lived in the temple. Ren Tianfei seemed to know what Han Fei was thinking and immediately said, I am a controller after all. Although my strength hasn't fully recovered, I was the strongest person below the king level in the past. It's not a problem for me to conquer the 1,000-star city alone. Han Fei glanced at him contemptuously. Okay, I'll believe you. By the way, what's your injury? I have a great technique that might be able to cure you completely. Ren Tianfei grinned. Forget it. It's just an apocalyptic divine technique. What you're walking on is not the apocalyptic divine technique. It's not as powerful as the real apocalyptic divine technique. You want to cure my injury as a semi-sovereign? That's just wishful thinking. When you reach the half-monarch realm, you might be able to use this technique to cure me. Since Ren Tianfei didn't ask for it, Han Fei wouldn't insist on it. Since Ren Tianfei thought that he hadn't walked on the apocalyptic divine technique, he would let him think that way for a while longer. When he became a venerable, he would be scared to death. On the third floor, Han Fei saw that the entire floor was surrounded by some golden lines. Obviously, this was a teleportation array. At least, judging from the level of the teleportation array, the complex golden patterns and the weird pattern structure, it should be much stronger than the one in the Shuemu heaven. The place where the immortal palaces were located was a place that ordinary people couldn't reach. It was hidden in space gaps and was difficult to find. Besides, among the immortal palaces, there were strong and weak ones. The Life Queen once said, Yin and Yang, colored glass, golden crow, dragon subduing. From her words, Han Fei felt that the level of the Yin-Yang heaven might not be low, or even very high. After all, when the Life Queen said this, she didn't say that they were not ranked first. Looking at the teleportation array, Ren Tianfei said, This Yin-Yang palace is the last test for you. It's not that we don't have the ability to clean it, but if we clean it, we may pay a much greater price than you do. That thing is more lethal to us than it is to you. The stronger you are, the greater the threat you will face. Remember, if you don't have to use your full power, then don't. That thing is very blind. Han Fei was dumbfounded. Why do I feel that that thing is alive? Ren Tianfei smiled. What do you think? It's not an exaggeration to say that it's alive. It's like an eye of the heavens, monitoring all living beings. But if something goes wrong, it will pop up and cause trouble. Han Fei asked one last question. I've never understood why it only appeared in our yin-yang heaven. Why didn't it go to other places in the 36 immortal palaces? Ren Tianfei looked at Han Fei weirdly. That's your question. Do you think stealing time counts as going against the heavens? Han Fei's lips twitched. That makes sense. I've stolen a portion of the Age of Chaos and sealed it up. Did the Heavenly Way really not notice it at all? It's like I'm a king. If I find that someone steals from my place, will I still trust him? Thinking of this, Han Fei couldn't help but smile bitterly. Then can this thing be driven away? Ren Tianfei shrugged. I don't know. I'm just a controller, not a king. I can control the central holy city, but I can't control the immortal palaces. It's useless to ask me about this. You have to figure it out yourself. Han Fei smiled. Okay, I'll go by myself. Han Fei quickly walked to the center of the array, and spiritual energy surged under him. In an instant, a large number of golden-veined patterns were activated. When the golden light flashed, the scene in front of Han Fei suddenly changed. What was even more surprising than the change in front of him was that Han Fei felt a terrifying temperature coming at him like an avalanche. Wow. Oh my God! Chapter 1476. Han Fei couldn't believe the scene in front of him. Is this the legendary Immortal Palace? After seeing the Waterwood Immortal Palace, Han Fei felt that no one had entered the Yin-Yang Palace for such a long time. Maybe the spiritual energy there was a disaster, and the spiritual fruits had grown for tens of thousands of years. But now it seemed that this was not the case at all. In Han Fei's eyes, the flames were a disaster. As far as the eye could see, it was like hell, and there was lava everywhere. Although the spiritual energy here was indeed bursting, the spiritual energy here was extremely violent, as if there were spiritual energy explosions happening all the time. In the sky there was a huge big eye, and a magma waterfall was flowing down from the eye. It looked as if he was crying tears of blood. In just an instant, the clothes on Han Fei's body had been burned to ashes. The terrifying temperature was even hotter than when Han Fei drilled through the mantle magma in the Waterwood Heaven. Of course, at this moment, he had already reached the level of a semi-venerable. The indestructible golden body had also been completely shaped. Although the temperature was scorching, it couldn't hurt him at all. In these flames, Han Fei saw some figures. These figures were either lying, sitting, or lying on the ground. Han Fei could feel strong power from them. Puppets! Han Fei thought to himself. The old turtle said, Han Fei, this place doesn't look very good. Han Fei rolled his eyes. This isn't just King not good. It's simply breaking all the beautiful expectations in my heart. This place is simply a mess. The Immortal Palace is even more dangerous than hell. Originally, Han Fei was in high spirits, hoping to reap a bountiful harvest here. But now it seemed that not only couldn't he take back anything, but he also seemed to have to take out a lot of treasures. Huff! With a thought in Han Fei's mind, Little Black and Little White appeared beside him. These two little guys seemed to be taken aback. However, seeing that their master was here, they were immediately relieved. For the two of them, this terrifying temperature of the flames couldn't hurt them at all. It was just that Little White was a little unhappy. However, this time, Han Fei didn't put Little White into Forge the Universe. Instead, he said, "Daughter, take a breath of the violent spiritual energy here and eat as much as you can. Son, these terrifying flames belong to you now." Didn't you say that the scorching flame was lacking? This time you can eat your fill. Little Black and Little White's bodies began to expand. Then, both of them opened their mouths wide and began to swallow crazily. At this moment, Han Fei saw that the eyeball of the heavenly path magic eye in the sky seemed to move and glance in his direction. Han Fei took a deep breath. Ren Tianfei once said that other people had to pay a much greater price to become a king than he did. It must be because they were fighting against the eye of heaven's path. His cultivation was too low, so the difficulty that the heaven's path law eye imposed on him wouldn't be too great. Now it was a complete mess. The entire immortal palace was filled with domineering flame essence, burning Han Fei's whole body. This meant that the challenge had come. Sure enough, Han Fei sensed that more and more puppets appeared in the flames. Although Little Black and Little White were already trying their best to swallow. However, the two of them were not strong enough. Even if they used all their strength, they could only form a vortex. And the rampaging energy, spiritual energy, and fire elements in the Yin-Yang Palace were too much. Swish! A puppet stepped out, holding a rusty long knife in its hand, and slashed at Han Fei. The might of this saber strike was filled with an extremely special power. It did not seem like the destructive power that an explorer could casually send out. Han Fei took a breath of energy and punched, ready to crush the figure together with the long saber. Han Fei didn't use his power of the Great Path. The reason was that the Eye of Heaven's path was watching him. If he used a stronger power, would the Eye of Heaven's path increase the difficulty? However, although it was not the sacrificing punch, Han Fei's punch was still unparalleled. Although Han Fei had crushed the long saber in the puppet's hand, this punch seemed to have hit an iron mountain. Although the puppet's body was distorted, it was not crushed. Wow! What a strong physique! The old turtle couldn't help but say, "These puppets have been tempered by this strong fire element all day long. I don't know how many tens of thousands of years they have been refined. Maybe their strength is not good, but I'm afraid none of them are weak in terms of physical strength." Gulp! Han Fei swallowed. "I forgot to ask, how many puppets are there in the Immortal Palace?" After seeing the Waterwood Immortal Palace, Han Fei felt that it was not big, only a few dozen kilometers long. At this moment, Han Fei's perception swept out, but he could only scan a kilometer away. Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, how big is this Immortal Palace? How many puppets are there?" Hardly had Han Fei asked the question when he saw a red laser coming at him from the Eye of the Heavenly Path in an instant. Han Fei didn't even have time to react. Who knew that the Eye of Heaven's path would suddenly attack like this? Han Fei didn't even have time to step on the array, and was hit hard by the blow. Han Fei rolled on the ground for thousands of meters away. His body was badly mutilated, his internal organs were rolling, and all his hair was burned. Even his bones were aching faintly. The old turtle said in horror, "No, it can feel my power. As soon as my soul power probed, it was all obliterated. It even intended to destroy me directly." Han Fei was shocked. This is 2F** king much. Does it mean that the old turtle can't attack? Swish, swish with a thought, Han Fei directly stored Little Black and Little White into Forge the Universe at the same time. Because those puppets began to move. If these puppets were easy to deal with, Little Black and Little White would be fine. But now it seemed that none of the puppets here were easy to deal with. With so many terrifying forces, who can resist them on the sea demon battlefield? Han Fei was speechless. These puppets were now attacking crazily. For a time, spears were like dragons, knives were shining, and swords were slashing at Han Fei. Clank, clank, clank. After setting up a defensive array for himself, Han Fei tried to control these puppets with the void lines. However, when the void lines buckled these puppets, Han Fei immediately saw a big bleeding eye, which seemed to be the Eye of Heaven's path. Puff! At that moment, Han Fei bled from his eyes, nose, and mouth. The blood instantly evaporated in the flames, and then was sucked back by Han Fei along with its energy. Han Fei was horrified. It's over. All the puppets here are finished. They either didn't have souls or were ownerless residual souls, retaining some instinctive consciousness. But now it seemed that these souls had all been contaminated by the eye of heaven's path, and none of them could be saved. Ho! Under the 100 beasts' soul-suppressing roar, the 3 puppets around Han Fei seemed to have their souls shattered and collapse. Seeing this, Han Fei was overjoyed. Yes, he could attack with his soul. Even if he could crush these puppets, it wouldn't do him any good. But if he destroyed their souls, then their puppet bodies could still be used. For example, the soul-splitting technique was the most basic control method. If he separated a wisp of his soul, these puppets would be under his control. Of course, the only disadvantage of this method was that he would have to divide a lot of his soul power. Divine Stab. Fortunately, the God-scaring painting had been completed, and the God-scaring stab had been completely transformed into the Divine Stab. It was just that he wasn't proficient in it yet. After all, Han Fei hadn't used it recently. Now he could use it to deal with these guys. A puppet without a soul was just a puppet. Therefore, with a thought, Han Fei collected the 3 puppets into Forge the Universe just like collecting an item. However, Han Fei didn't feel happy for long. Although he had enough strength to kill the corroded souls of these puppets. However, there were too many puppets here. No matter how strong Han Fei was, he didn't use the power of the Great Path, so he only had a strong physique. And these puppets in front of him, in terms of physique alone, almost all exceeded half a venerable being. Thousands of puppets attacked at the same time. No matter how strong Han Fei was, he could only run around the Divine Palace and fight while running. If he had to fight head-on, Han Fei would be hammered unconscious by these puppets at most 10 minutes. Ho! Han Fei's soul attack methods were limited after all. In addition to the 100 beasts' soul-suppressing roar, he could only use the Divine Stab. The void lines could deal with the enemy, but against the eye of the Great Path, he would be injured first. At this time, he couldn't use it at all. The old turtle was in Han Fei's body, so he said leisurely, "Maybe your strength is too low. This should just be the instinctive defense mechanism of the eye of the Great Path. So, it shouldn't be difficult for you to subdue these puppets." Han Fei said, "I'm afraid that some of these puppets have developed their own consciousness in the past tens of thousands of years." Han Fei remembered the example of the water fairy. If there were venerable realm puppets, it would be hard to defeat them. The old turtle said, "I don't think so. The eye of the Great Path is here. Do you think it can tolerate the birth of a new consciousness? Even if it is born, I'm afraid it will be immediately obliterated. That's why I said it's not difficult to subdue these puppets. It'll just take a little more time. A few days will be enough." Han Fei sneered. A few days? Now, the number of puppets that appeared in his perception had exceeded 1,000. Even in the Shuemu sky, this power was an incomparably powerful force. The fierce battle continued, and the interior of the Yin-Yang Palace was riddled with holes. However, as Han Fei ran, he found that something was wrong. He seemed to have run to the center of the Divine Palace. He saw a large palace quietly standing amidst the dense fire elemental energy. Huh? This palace is sealed? Even the eye of the Great Path can't break the seal? Chapter 1477. Han Fei was wondering if there was a palace in this place that was not polluted by the eye of the heavenly path. Presumably, this palace was probably left to him by his mother. So, without hesitation, Han Fei bumped into the seal of the palace. Generally speaking, this kind of seal should be able to distinguish the aura of the intruder. In fact, Han Fei was not sure. However, a seal was not enough to eat him. So, without the slightest hesitation, Han Fei bumped into it. Han Fei felt that he had bumped into an iron mountain, and his whole body was almost flattened. However, the seal did not weaken at all, nor could he get in easily. A lot of bombardment followed. With a flash, Han Fei appeared 1,000 meters away and circled around the palace. However, to Han Fei's disappointment, there was no entrance or exit on this seal. He had tried 5, 6, 7, 8 times, but not once had he managed to enter. Han Fei even flew to the top to take a look. However, he still didn't find any entrance. The old turtle said, "Maybe the way you entered is wrong. After all, this used to be the residence of a king. You are still far from becoming a king. Even if many people think you can become a king, you are not one now. It's normal that the seal doesn't recognize you. If you have the strength, you might as well kill those puppets first. It seems that this is not a job that ordinary people can do. Fortunately, I didn't come until now. If I came earlier, I would have been beaten to death by these puppets. Oh no, even if a junior venerable came, I am afraid that they would also die. Their physiques are not as strong as these puppets." BM. 3 days later, Han Fei activated the war body technique and swallowed the souls of more than 1,300 puppets in these 3 days. Han Fei was very impatient. In the past 3 days, he was simply a fighting machine, and his mental state was extremely exhausted. The spiritual fruits in Forge the Universe had been consumed by him. If these puppets were just ordinary demi-venerables, it would be fine. However, what were these things? These were all mindless machines, unkillable cockroaches. Other than using mental attacks to deal with them one by one, if he were to rely on absolute strength to fight them, he would have been crippled long ago. However, it was fortunate that these were puppets. If he wasn't a puppet but a conscious person, he would have been slaughtered long ago. Whoosh! The Immortal Palace did not occupy a large area. It should only be about the same size as the Waterwood Immortal Palace. A total of 1,302 puppets were wiped out by Han Fei. Bang! Han Fei lay on the ground and gasped for air. With a thought, Little Black and Little White appeared. Han Fei said, "Son, daughter, swallow it slowly and carefully. Swallow the spiritual energy and energy of this damn place clean." Han Fei cleaned up these puppets. The Eye of Heaven's path didn't do anything out of the ordinary either. Perhaps in the eyes of the heavenly Tao Dharma Eye, these puppets were just small fries. Perhaps they were like ants on the ground. If they were gone, then so be it. They were not worth paying attention to. And the strength that Han Fei showed was only that of a semi-venerable, which had nothing to do with the strength of a king. Therefore, the big eyeball did nothing except glancing at Han Fei occasionally. After the battle, the endless and violent spiritual energy began to spontaneously pour into Han Fei's body. After all, Han Fei had transcended the mortal meridians, so spiritual energy and energy would automatically drill into his body. Even if Han Fei didn't do anything but just lay down, his body would be filled with spiritual energy in half an hour at most. Fortunately, Little Black and Little White, one on the left and one on the right, were swallowing frantically. Whoosh! Han Fei had just laid down for less than a quarter of an hour, and the bodies of Little Black and Little White began to tremble slightly. Han Fei was stunned. Little Black and Little White couldn't go any further. If they went any further, they would have to go through a tribulation. Han Fei didn't know how these two little guys were going to go through the tribulation. For a long time, Han Fei had forgotten to ask this question. Did the tribulation of spiritual beasts have anything to do with their masters? At this moment, information emerged in Han Fei's eyes. Name twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish, evolving. Introduction. This is the descendant of the mysterious yin-yang sky-swallowing fish from ancient times. The black and white fishes are born together. The white fish is docile, while the black fish is cruel. They are symbiotic. As long as one is alive, the other will not die. Level 69 Equality, mysterious, store spiritual energy, evolving. Food. Omnivorous, can swallow anything, battle skills. Supreme Yin-Yang Wheel, Spirit Devouring Body, Fusion, Gemini Divine Technique. We note, The black fish cannot be seen. Except for the owner, only those with the yin-yang divine eyes born by heaven and earth can see through it. After fusing, their battle prowess would increase greatly, comparable to a divine weapon. Contained soul power, evolving. Han Fei's heart trembled. Are little black and little white going to transcend their tribulation? Wait, is it really okay to undergo tribulation in this godforsaken place? Han Fei quickly said, Old Yuan, will there be any accidents when my naturally endowed spiritual beast transcends the tribulation under the gaze of the eye of the heavenly path? Han Fei had no experience in this regard. I wonder what this heavenly Tao Dharma eye is? Who knew what it was trying to monitor? It's weird that it keeps looking at people like this. The old turtle said leisurely. How does a connate Taoist aptitude body transcend the tribulation? I don't know either. They are Taoist aptitude bodies, so it's the same whether they transcend the tribulation or not. Because they are the embodiment of the way of heaven, they are a part of the way of heaven. If they transcend the tribulation, I always feel that the way of heaven is transcending itself. Han Fei was dumbfounded. So? The old turtle said grumpily, I'm not omnipotent. I'm a turtle, and I spend most of my time sleeping. Besides, the world is so big, and there's a limit to what I know. If a naturally endowed spiritual beast needs to transcend a tribulation, the owner should be able to replace it. Because you are in a symbiotic relationship. If your naturally endowed spiritual beast dies, it will greatly damage your foundation. If the owner dies, the naturally endowed spiritual beast will also die. So, according to my experience, it should be replaceable. Hearing this, Han Fei immediately breathed a sigh of relief. As long as it could be replaced, the real strength of Little Black and Little White hadn't reached the level of explorers yet. If there was a tribulation that they couldn't guard against, they would have to face it themselves. Seeing that the eye of heaven didn't respond to him, Han Fei continued to lie for a while. 1 hour later. At this time, Little Black and Little White had completely stopped devouring spiritual energy and fire energy. The amount they had devoured so far might not even be 1% of the energy and fire energy escaping from the entire Yin-Yang Fairy Palace. But Han Fei didn't panic at all. Just now, he asked Little Black and Little White to devour spiritual energy to provide them with enough energy. More importantly, he needed to rest. After 3 days of crazy fighting, his body had been hammered thousands of times, and his bones were almost broken. He could already be considered inhuman to be able to kill 1,302 puppet. At this moment, Han Fei felt that he hadn't fully recovered and wanted to continue to lie for a while. However, the bodies of Little Black and Little White suddenly began to flicker. From the looks of it, was he really going to advance? Han Fei was a little stunned. Is what the old turtle said true? A connate Taoist aptitude body doesn't need to transcend a tribulation? Bada. Suddenly, Han Fei raised his head, only to see that in the distant sky, the eye of heaven's path blinked. In the eye of heaven, there was a vortex of flames. He didn't know if it was triggered by the breakthrough of Little Black and Little White. Han Fei's heart skipped a beat. He wondered if he should put Little Black and Little White away. He could make a breakthrough at any time. He should be able to make a breakthrough in the Soul Sea. However, what if the eye of heaven's path noticed him? It felt weird. The old turtle said, Don't panic. There must be a condition for the big eye to be triggered. You cleaned up so many puppets with your strength of half a venerable, but it didn't attack you. It's very likely that it won't attack anyone below the venerable level. Han Fei remembered that Ren Tianfei, the old B***starred, also said that the less power you used, the less the eye of heaven's path would notice you. However, Han Fei had already stood up. Once the eye of heaven's path moved, he would immediately put Little Black and Little White away. He could also enter Forge the Universe for a while. However, after several minutes, the eye of heaven's path didn't move. Han Fei heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this thing wouldn't attack anyone below the venerable level. 1 hour, 2 hours, after another 6 hours, Han Fei saw light flickering on Little Black and Little White, and information appeared in his eyes again. Name Twin Yin-Yang Spirit Swallowing Fish. Introduction. This is a descendant of the mysterious ancient Yin-Yang sky-swallowing fish. The black and white fish are born together. The white fish is docile, and the black fish is brutal. They are symbiotic. As long as one of them survives, the other won't die. Level 70 Quality, Mysterious Storage of Chaotic Aura, 1 Strand Food, Everything Can Be Swallowed, Combat Skills, Supreme Yin-Yang Wheel, Spirit Swallowing Body, Fusion, Gemini Divine Technique, Soul Power Fusion, 1 hour. Remarks. The blackfish is invisible. Except for the Master, only the Yin-Yang Divine Eyes born by heaven and earth can see through it. After fusion, its combat power will be greatly increased, and it will be comparable to a divine weapon. Han Fei had already guessed that Little Black and Little White were making a breakthrough. Although Han Fei felt it was quite amazing that they didn't go through a tribulation. However, Little Black and Little White were mysterious creatures, and they had the connate Taoist figure. It seemed reasonable for this to happen to them. However, when Han Fei saw that the storage of spiritual energy turned into the storage of chaotic aura, he immediately felt shocked. For a long time, Han Fei had no way to obtain chaotic aura. He didn't even know what chaotic aura was. However, now Little Black and Little White actually produced chaotic aura one step ahead of him. Except that the storage of spiritual energy turned into chaotic aura. After this breakthrough, the soul power numbers of Little Black and Little White also disappeared and were replaced by the exact fusion time. The soul power represented the length of time the Master had fused with his spiritual beast. In the past, when Han Fei fused with Little Black and Little White, this time was calculated. Less than 2 hours had passed. Once this critical value was exceeded, Han Fei would feel that his spirit would become weak. The Gemini Divine Technique was a kind of wonderful technique that could even make his body disappear, so it didn't count. But if it was just a simple fusion, it used to take up to 1 hour at most, but now it had doubled. This was too touching for Han Fei. First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1478. The advancement of Little Black and Little White was completely beyond Han Fei's expectation. On this trip to the Thousand-Star City, Han Fei never thought that he would have this extra gain. Back then, when he was deducing the soul-searching technique, the subsequent deductions required chaotic chi. However, at that time, he didn't know what chaotic chi was. However, there was no need to ask about it in advance. It was just like the realm. When one reached it, one would naturally be able to experience it. It was something that would happen naturally. If his realm wasn't high enough, it would be a bit boring to force it out. This time, although the information of Little Black and Little White's advancement had changed, there were no new abilities, which made Han Fei feel quite regretful. However, Han Fei thought about it. If they could give birth to a new ability every time they advanced, wouldn't it be too amazing? This time, being able to breed chaotic chi had already greatly exceeded his expectations. At least, if he needed chaotic chi in the future, he wouldn't have to worry about it. However, at this moment, Han Fei probably didn't have time to study the chaotic chi. During the advancement of Little Black and Little White, the surrounding spiritual energy and energy were still surging towards Han Fei's body spontaneously. Originally, Han Fei thought that after his body absorbed enough, it would stop absorbing. But not so. In the Immortal Palace, the spiritual energy was violent. In addition to spiritual energy, there was also an inexplicable energy. This energy was spreading slightly into his body. Besides, Han Fei felt that this energy seemed to be making him manic. Heavenly enlightenment. Bam! With a heavenly enlightenment, Han Fei felt the explosive power all over his body and hurriedly said, "Old Yuan, did I swallow chaotic chi by mistake?" In Han Fei's opinion, ordinary spiritual energy and energy wouldn't make his body explode. Otherwise, there could only be another kind of unknown energy here. He had been fighting for the past 3 days, and spiritual energy and energy erupted crazily, so Han Fei hadn't noticed it. Now that the battle was over, the problem immediately arose. When he was in the Waterwood Immortal Palace, he had never encountered this situation. Or maybe it was because his time in the Waterwood Immortal Palace was very short. After all, it was someone else's territory, not his own. The old turtle said, "No, chaotic energy isn't something that can be casually absorbed. What you absorbed was most likely the corrosive power of that large eyeball. Those mutated puppets might have been corroded by this power." Hiss. F***ck, why didn't you say so earlier? The old turtle said unhurriedly, "There's no hurry. This kind of power also needed a long time to infuse. It won't be effective for a while." Han Fei didn't know what to say. Of course it's big. He had never thought of absorbing this power. However, even if he didn't want to absorb them, they were still drilling into his body. Fortunately, his heavenly awakening divine art had dispersed this power. Otherwise, he would feel extremely bloated. The Heaven's Path Arcane didn't seem like a good thing at all. Although it was not attacking him, Han Fei did not want to be under its gaze for too long. After all, the puppets were killed and thrown into Forge the Universe. Except for the Eye of the Heavenly Law, the Yin-Yang Fairy Palace was still shrouded in violent spiritual energy and chaotic fire energy. However, they posed no threat. Han Fei naturally had plenty of time to find the entrance to the palace. Han Fei felt that the entrance should be covered by an array. Therefore, he could try every single area of the palace. Of course, such a stupid method was just Han Fei's guess. What if the location of the entrance could be changed? Then it would be useless even if he tried them one by one. Indeed, Han Fei was helpless. After searching for so long, he didn't find any trace at all. So, after trying again for several hours, Han Fei still couldn't find the entrance to the palace. This restriction was not open to him. Therefore, Han Fei had to look at other places above this fairy palace. Because perception was useless, Han Fei could only search slowly. Perhaps the previous battle was too violent, or maybe the battle here was very crazy, causing the surface of the floating island to be in a mess. Han Fei estimated that if it weren't for the fact that this floating island had been nourished by the essence of heaven and earth and had an extremely hard texture, it would have been destroyed by an ancient battle. Otherwise, they would have long since been scattered by a great battle in ancient times. Looking around, it looked like it had been gnawed by dogs. Han Fei cleaned up everywhere, piling up the gravel and mud again. Even these seemingly worthless things, Han Fei found that he couldn't put them into Forge the Universe. Han Fei grabbed a handful of mud, felt it, and found that this mud also contained a lot of spiritual energy and energy. Wow, Han Fei sighed. Is this still mud? It's no exaggeration to call it an elixir. This mouthful of mud is probably as good as an ordinary spiritual fruit. It took Han Fei a full 2 days to clean about 1/3 of the surface of the floating island in the Yin-Yang heaven like a robot. At this moment, Han Fei was standing in front of a weird hole. Rather than calling it a cave, it would be better to call it a huge square. After all, this hole was too big. Han Fei walked around many times before he realized that this was a huge hole, which seemed to have been smashed by something. This big hole had existed for a long time, and there seemed to be another world inside. Now, it blocked Han Fei's vision. Or rather, Han Fei felt that what he saw was just an illusion. It seems that I still have to go in and have a look. Han Fei felt that if he went in through this hole, he would find something if nothing went wrong. As for what was inside, where could this big hole go? Han Fei didn't know. Maybe this should be his destination. After all, he had been searching for so many days, but he didn't find anything. Standing at the entrance of the hole, Han Fei subconsciously pinched his fingers, having a bad feeling. The old turtle said, Since you're here and you've already faced the eye of the heavenly law, you have to go. Han Fei said lightly, I'm thinking about a question. The old turtle asked, What? Han Fei looked up at the eye of the heavenly law. Do you think it is transformed by the Great Way, or is it controlled by someone behind it? The old turtle froze for a moment and sneered. Nonsense, of course it is transformed by the Great Way. This Yin-Yang Fairy Palace violated the rules of the Great Way and created a big problem for heaven and earth. The rules of the Great Way have to pay attention to it, right? If it's controlled by someone, what's the purpose of them staying here? After all, is the time of a strong master not time? If it's a higher-level master, how can they have the time to keep staring at this place? Han Fei said again, If it is transformed by the Great Way, then what is the Great Way? Is it a person? The old turtle scoffed. What's wrong with you? If you want to fight, you have to go down. Otherwise, why don't you go and kill this big eyeball? If you kill it, no one will look at you. The corners of Han Fei's mouth twitched. He had a feeling that things were not so simple. However, this was the only way. When Han Fei stepped into this seal, he felt as if he had entered the Grand Supreme Elder's 8 trigrams pill furnace again. The surrounding temperature was simply too high. This F*King temperature was probably more than double that of the outside. He felt that his skin was slightly unable to resist it. However, this was not a big deal. Han Fei looked around as if he was in a barrier. This barrier was composed of gray matter and he couldn't see the outside. Han Fei casually punched out and the invincible fist mark was branded on the barrier. As a result, the power of the fist mark was directly absorbed by the gray seal. After all, this was where the king was. Although it was his mother's territory, the danger was not low at all. Han Fei didn't intend to let Little Black absorb these flames. This space seemed to be too large and the power of the fire element was too fierce. Even if Little Black kept absorbing it, it shouldn't be able to absorb it in a day or two. It was not that Han Fei felt it was a waste of time. But Han Fei felt that he should strike while the iron was hot. If the remaining half-drop of origin water was not in the palace, it might be below here. He couldn't enter that palace at all. If the half-drop of origin water was placed here, why didn't he swallow it first? After he became a venerable, his strength would be greatly increased. Even if he encountered trouble, it would be easy to deal with it, right? Han Fei quickly dove for more than 50 kilometers. When there was only fire element left around him, he said helplessly, Sure enough, this is a secret realm space, an independent small world. If it were still on the floating island, I'm afraid the floating island would be penetrated. The old turtle said, The heavenly secrets here are chaotic. The heavenly path magic I outside shouldn't be able to see in. Han Fei asked in surprise, Really? It's only more than 50 kilometers. It can see the entire Yin-Yang sky, but it can't see here? The old turtle said, The heavenly secrets are chaotic, which means that this space is a chaotic place. That thing just looks like an eye, but it's not a real eye. It doesn't care if you fight under its nose. It's a kind of surveillance of the heavenly path. How can it observe the chaotic heavenly secret? Shoot! Han Fei was chatting with the old turtle when a huge dragon head suddenly appeared in front of him. More importantly, the dragon head was still staring at him, which made Han Fei shiver. Han Fei made a fist mark, and at least 1/3 of the energy in his body was gathered in this punch. In addition to being startled by the sudden appearance of this dragon head, Han Fei immediately recognized that this should be the skeleton that the Azure Dragon Phantom was looking for in the Ideal Palace. Seeing this skeleton, Han Fei was not surprised. It was not unreasonable for the soul of the Azure Dragon to appear in the Ideal Palace. Although he couldn't tell the relationship between this Azure Dragon and the enemy, at least on the island of the Waterwood Sky, the human race and the dragon race seemed to be standing on opposite sides. Therefore, the soul of the Azure Dragon appearing in the Ideal Palace could only be captured by the old turtle. Then, they reached some kind of agreement. Otherwise, the soul of the azure dragon couldn't have the golden page. Now it seemed that the golden page was also a test for him. Wasn't this secret realm the same? Since the azure dragon's divine soul was detained, what about the corpse? Without the support of the soul, what was the use of this skeleton? Although they hadn't entered the real battle yet, Han Fei's guess was right. This was indeed the skeleton of a dragon head. The azure dragon's head was not facing him but drooped on the other side. Phew! Han Fei patted his chest. Humph, there's no soul. It's just a skeleton. The old turtle asked, "Are you going to return it to the dragon?" Han Fei immediately sneered. Return it? Why would I return the dragon corpse that I got? Anyway, I've got the golden page. The old turtle looked as if he had expected this. He knew that Han Fei wouldn't return it. Now, he was probably already thinking about how to make use of this dragon corpse. Han Fei quickly jumped over. This dragon corpse was coiled into a circle, with its head and tail connected. In the center of this circle, there was a small glass bottle floating, and Han Fei could even see the liquid in the bottle. Origin water. Han Fei's eyes lit up, and the big void hand had already reached out to grab the small bottle. However, the 10,000 zhang dragon corpse shuddered. At the moment when Han Fei grabbed the origin water, it suddenly came to life and whipped at Han Fei with its tail. Han Fei's face changed drastically, and he was about to twist the void. However, he found that the space he was in was actually imprisoned. Sacrificing punch! Rumble! Han Fei was whipped thousands of meters away by the tail. At this moment, Han Fei loosened his arms, making a cracking sound. Han Fei gritted his teeth. Even the dead one is so strong? I think too highly of me. Did I get a dragon corpse to guard the origin water? Damn it. Second update. Please vote end of this chapter. Chapter 1479. But at the moment when the ancient dragon corpse woke up, Han Fei felt as if thousands of iron-headed fish were galloping in his heart. Just from its big head, he knew it was not easy to defeat it. Han Fei didn't know what his mother was thinking. Didn't she think of lowering the difficulty a little? After all, it was already extremely difficult to reach the divine palace. At this time, the old turtle said, "This dragon corpse has been refined for tens of thousands of years. Its physical strength is not necessarily weaker than yours." After hearing this, Han Fei's heart sank. From the power of that blow just now, he had already felt that the strength of this ancient dragon was very strong. Its body was only so big, and a casual shake of its tail was not something that ordinary people could withstand. Besides, the ancient azure dragon corpse was clearly being used as a spirit formation guardian. It was probably to prevent someone from stealing the source water. But since the ancient dragon corpse was used as a guard, its strength obviously couldn't exceed the king realm. Besides, when I left this dragon corpse, I should have considered my combat ability. If I left a half-king realm, I would be almost invincible under the king realm. Han Fei thought that it might be possible. If he defeated a half-king realm, wouldn't he be able to prove that he had the potential to become a king? However, if it was so difficult to get this half-drop of source water, then when he got the half-drop in the sea-quelling painting, his mother should have told him. Even if she didn't say it at that time, she could have said it when he was in the sky meditation garden. Han Fei took a deep breath and guessed in his heart, maybe this ancient dragon corpse is not as powerful as I thought. With a thought in Han Fei's mind, the infinity water turned into thousands of knife lights and swept across. Clang, clang, clang. After a little experiment, Han Fei found that the infinity water had no effect on this ancient dragon corpse. From this, it could be seen that the toughness of his physique had already reached an unimaginable level. Ho! The dragon roared, the void shook, and the sound waves rushed straight into Han Fei's mind. Divine stab! Han Fei waved his hand, and the embroidery needle appeared in his hand. He gathered his spiritual power on it and opened the heavenly gate with his spear. The divine stab burst out. Bm, the dragon swung its tail, causing the void to explode. Surging ripples spread out in all directions. In an instant, his divine soul attack disappeared without a trace, like a stone sinking into the ocean. The power he exerted was obviously weaker than the ancient azure dragon corpse. Fighting against a creature with a physique comparable to his own, and a creature of the dragon race at that, the difficulty of the battle was not low. And this was only the ancient azure dragon corpse. If it had a divine soul, who knew how much power it could unleash? In just a few seconds, after 2 tests, Han Fei confirmed some information. His physique is not stronger than mine, but his strength is definitely greater than mine. His strength was between a high-grade Venerable One and a top-grade Venerable One, and he fought based on his instincts and willpower. The ancient azure dragon corpse's only belief is to protect this half-drop of origin water. The corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up slightly. If that's all, it's just a bluff. Sure enough, if there is no accident, this ancient azure dragon corpse is either threatened by me or has reached an agreement with me. According to Han Fei's current preliminary estimation, even if this azure dragon was alive, it was at most a half-king realm. Maybe it was relatively strong among the half-king realms, but it should still be a step away from the sea expansion realm. Han Fei twisted the space and tried to appear directly next to the origin water with the star teleportation technique. However, when he was less than 100 meters away from the origin water, with a bang, Han Fei was bounced away. A golden spherical restriction directly blocked Han Fei's way. Even the revolving star transposition technique was sealed within that area. Oh! The dragon roared and Han Fei's head hurt. He could only resist it with the soul driving array and dodged again. It seemed to be irritated by Han Fei's sudden crossing of the boundary, so the dragon corpse took the initiative to attack. Its huge body began to shrink at an extremely fast speed. Crack, crack, crack. As the azure dragon corpse shrank, thousands of dragon scales fell off its body at once. Swish, 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 the scales fluttered and intertwined into a net. Han Fei didn't take it seriously. After all, this power was only at the advanced venerable realm at most. Han Fei's body dodged like a phantom. Even if the dragon scales fell on his body, they only made clanking sounds. This was the same as when Han Fei swept the azure dragon corpse with the infinity water. Neither of them could hurt the other. Swish, Han Fei's figure disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already on the back of the azure dragon corpse. Because he didn't feel any soul power surging in this dragon corpse, Han Fei believed that the only power this guy could use to attack the soul was the dragon roar. The power of his divine soul was not weak. Therefore, although the dragon roar was a little threatening to him, it was not very strong. Although Ren Tianfei said that his soul power was not very high and there was still a lot of room for growth, but that was only relative to the old monster that was tens of thousands of years old. If the true body of the azure dragon was here, Han Fei definitely wouldn't stand on its back so casually. However, this was just a corpse after all. Han Fei looked around and said to the old turtle, "Old Yuan, help me take a look at this dragon corpse. What's different about it? There must be something that can break the seal." The old turtle said, "Are you so sure? The way to break the seal is on this dragon corpse?" Han Fei smiled and said, "It can only be on it. If the guardian doesn't hold the key, then what's the point of the guardian's existence? Things had to be given to others after all. The guardian can't hunt everyone who comes." The old turtle pondered for a moment. "Have you forgotten that dragons have dragon balls?" Han Fei let the infinity water around him collide with the dragon scales. With a space distortion, he appeared in front of the dragon mouth. Ho! The stinky wind of the dragon roar instantly sprayed Han Fei's face. However, on the surface of Han Fei's body, layers of soul-driving arrays appeared one after another. While the dragon roared, Han Fei drilled directly into the dragon's mouth. At that moment, the void lines turned into more than 300, gushing out and drilling into the azure dragon corp. And Han Fei raised his hands and directly opened the dragon mouth that was about to close. Ho! Those sharp teeth were even harder and sharper than dragon scales. Han Fei grabbed the 2 dragon teeth with both hands and thought to himself, fortunately, this dragon has become a little dragon. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to hold a tooth even if he hugged it. Even so, Han Fei's hands were dripping with blood. Out of instinct, the dragon mouth opened and closed. Han Fei's fist mark bombarded the dragon's mouth. The void lines had already drilled into the dragon's body. When Han Fei found a bead flashing with red light, he was slightly relieved. For a moment, all the void lines buckled. It should be noted that the void lines could not only control souls, but they could also be used for fishing. After all, it was also a kind of fishing line. When Han Fei buckled the Dragon Ball, the azure dragon seemed to be furious, and its body immediately grew larger. But Han Fei sneered, and the embroidery needle appeared in his hand. Grow, grow, grow. The azure dragon without a soul was just a sea snake. Except that its physique might have reached the half-king level, it couldn't do anything else. Of course, it would not be a problem for the ancient azure dragon corpse to guard a treasure. At least, if a junior or intermediate venerable came, he would probably be ruthlessly crushed. With the absolute advantage of his physical body, there was no need to reason at all. Puff! Han Fei stretched out his hand, buckled the dragon ball brought by the void lines, grabbed the embroidery needle, and with a twirl, he had already appeared outside the seal. When the seal lit up, Han Fei pushed the dragon ball forward, and his whole body, with a puff, got into the seal. Han Fei was a little surprised. "Old Yuan, how do you know? The key will be the dragon ball?" The old turtle said disdainfully. "Isn't this obvious? In this whole dragon, in addition to his body, the only thing that can be immortal is the dragon ball. This place is only so big. I just need to guess blindly." Han Fei smiled slightly. "But this dragon ball is smooth and dim. It seems that it has been covered with dust. You want to cultivate your strength again? I'm afraid it won't be easy." While talking, Han Fei had already walked to the side of the half-drop of origin water. The ancient azure dragon corpse was motionless at this moment. He didn't know whether it was stunned by the beating or after the dragon ball was taken. At this moment, the ancient azure dragon corpse was lying on the ground like a salted fish. It didn't look like it had been alive at all. After looking around and making sure that there was no mother's soul mark, Han Fei reached out and grabbed the small bottle. This process was surprisingly smooth. The bottle was still a little cold, which didn't match the environment here. Huff! Han Fei grinned. Last time, half a drop of origin water sent him to the limit of a hidden fisher, and his soul power was sent to the level of a law enforcer. That was the stage where he grew the fastest. However, at that time, he was still very weak. It was only natural that the origin water was so effective. Who knew what kind of effect the remaining half a drop of origin water could achieve? Gulp! With the previous experience, Han Fei directly swallowed the origin water. Before, Han Fei clearly knew that he should have reached the limit of the explorer realm. He had even cultivated the indestructible golden body, but he still wanted to become stronger? He could only continue to integrate his soul into the golden body, cast an immortal soul, and continue to cultivate the indestructible tyrant body. Han Fei had never dared to cultivate this great technique. The main reason was that the battle on the Scattered Stars Island was imminent, and he couldn't waste his soul power. Once his soul was integrated into the golden body, he wouldn't have any ownerless souls to replenish it. Even if he could replenish it, the ownerless souls couldn't be completely absorbed by him at once. If he cultivated it, it would inevitably lead to a great reduction in his soul power. When he divided half of his soul for his avatar, Han Fei had already experienced the disadvantages of a great reduction in his soul power. His overall strength would be reduced by more than 30%, and his soul power would also be much weaker. If he encountered an ordinary opponent, it would be fine. However, if he encountered a strong opponent, it would be extremely dangerous for him to be weakened even a little bit. At this moment, the moment he swallowed the origin water, Han Fei activated the cultivation of the indestructible tyrant body. What Han Fei was going to cultivate was immortal soul. Third. Well, end of this chapter. Chapter 1480. Unlike last time, this time, after taking the origin water, Han Fei's soul power had been greatly improved. However, Han Fei didn't know how much this improvement was for the time being. Now, Han Fei was going to practice the immortal soul. This was a very important moment. Han Fei knew very well that this was the only way for him to continue to improve himself in the explorer realm. As soon as this technique was used, Han Fei felt a splitting headache, which was different from the pain he felt when he was tempering his body. The cultivation method of the immortal soul was to crush a large amount of soul power and infiltrate it into the golden body. With the power of the invincible golden body, it was nourished and intertwined. To put it simply, Han Fei attached a layer of soul power to every corner of his golden body with the power of his soul. This part of power would gradually integrate with the golden body. After that, it could never be taken back. And this was just the beginning. After that, the soul power would be integrated into the flesh, blood, and skin, of course. These were all in the future. This kind of soul consumption was no easier than splitting half of the soul and giving it to an incarnation. Han Fei even felt that the final consequences might be a little more serious. It was foreseeable that if Han Fei directly chose to become a venerable, then with the help of the origin water, his strength would only become extremely strong after becoming a venerable. However, if he used the power of the origin water in the explorer realm first, then, after becoming a venerable, his realm might not necessarily be able to improve quickly. In terms of strength, he might be relatively weak. Of course, all this was Han Fei's own guess. The specific improvement would only be known after he cultivated. Han Fei felt that his soul was being quickly drawn away, and the part of the power that was drawn away seemed to be sealed in the golden body's skeleton. When his soul was absorbed into the golden body, Han Fei felt that his control over his body seemed to be changing. His soul was constantly being consumed. In the origin water, there was also a large amount of soul power filling Han Fei's soul sea. This made Han Fei let out a long sigh of relief. Sure enough, just as he had expected, this half a drop of origin water contained an extraordinarily high amount of spiritual energy. After all, the stage of obtaining the origin water was different, so its effect would be different. Now, the power of the divine soul was no longer a problem. However, another problem arose. Han Fei felt that his body was beginning to swell. Han Fei cultivated the immortal soul, but it had nothing to do with the physical body. Originally, the origin water not only enhanced the strength of the soul, it also had a great effect on improving the physical body. Han Fei's indestructible golden body was already very strong. It could even be said that Han Fei's golden blood and skin were beyond the scope of a normal human being. The power that Han Fei's every drop of blood and every cell could absorb was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. But now, with the infusion of the source water, the energy reserves in Han Fei's body were reaching saturation. Even though he had the indestructible golden body, he still couldn't withstand such a huge energy impact. The old turtle exclaimed, "This drop of water actually contains so much energy? It was even richer than the essence blood of a king. This is comparable to the essence blood of an emperor, right?" Han Fei had no time to talk nonsense with the old turtle. He had just started cultivating the undying tyrant body. If the energy could not be released, then he could only choose to break through to the supremacy stage after his body expanded to a certain extent. After 100 minutes, Han Fei's body expanded about twice as much. After that, it still maintained this growth rate. Finally, after Han Fei's body expanded to 6 times, he couldn't bear it anymore. His whole person began to gradually fall into a state of confusion, and the bottleneck of the supremacy stage had also begun to loosen, seeming to prompt Han Fei to break through. Because he started cultivating the undying tyrant body, Han Fei didn't feel that his soul power had increased at all. This was easy to understand. After all, these souls had gone to nourish his body. This was the first time that Han Fei had cultivated the immortal soul. If there was no source water, his soul would have been completely absorbed. There must be a return. Otherwise, with Han Fei's personality, he wouldn't have wasted so much soul power. After another 100 minutes, Han Fei was like a balloon, feeling that his body was about to explode at any time. The old turtle wasn't worried at first. However, it turned out that Han Fei's swollen body was simply outrageous. Before, this guy had been suppressing it and desperately refused to break through. Now, at the last moment, he was still suppressing it? This was playing with their lives. The old turtle roared in panic, "Hey, hey, hey! Han Fei boy, are you crazy? If you go on like this, you'll blow yourself up. Do you really think you're invincible? Stop, stop." However, Han Fei didn't listen to him at all. Han Fei heard the old turtle's words, but he really wanted to tell the old turtle, "You haven't walked the invincible road at all, nor have you had the undying golden body at this time. So, you can't understand how I feel at all. Although I look like I'm about to explode to death. But I can still bear it myself. At least, there's still some space for me. I can't take it anymore." After a moment, sizzle, 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 suddenly, Han Fei found that the golden bones all over his body seemed to be smoking. The bright golden color was fading slightly. It seemed to be wrapped in a layer of faint blue that was so shallow that it was barely visible. The moment this faint blue color appeared, the terrifying energy in Han Fei's body seemed to have found a vent and rushed madly towards Han Fei's golden bones. It was like a dry land that needed rain to moisten it. Han Fei's body began to shrink. 6 times. 5 times. 4 times. When Han Fei's body shrank to twice the normal size, a cracking sound suddenly appeared in Han Fei's mind. At that moment, Han Fei was shocked. Han Fei felt that his barrier to the venerable realm was beginning to show signs of breaking. The old turtle was dumbfounded. The demi-venerable realm can no longer accommodate the strength of your body and soul. You actually took the initiative to open the barrier to the venerable realm? At this moment, Han Fei felt that the power of the source water might have been consumed by more than half, and the explorer realm had come to an end. At the last moment of the demi-venerable realm, Han Fei glanced at the data, and information appeared in his eyes. Owner Han Fei level greater than 79 demi-venerable, spiritual energy 420,000/420,000 chaotic energy untransformed spiritual power 49098/79999 damaged, perception range greater than 10,000 kilometers, power greater than 2,498 waves, first spiritual heritage unknown. Second spiritual heritage, unawakened, first spiritual beast, twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish, level 70. Second spiritual beast, unawakened, main art sky stealing technique, level 6 avoid fishing, venerable level, divine quality. At that moment, Han Fei grinned. Sure enough, there was no such thing as the limit. As long as he could continue to go on, he could still go on. But at this time, Han Fei's body, from his spiritual heritage to his physical body, and then to his soul power, could only accommodate this much in the demi-venerable realm. Any more and he might explode. Han Fei also knew that he had nowhere to go after reaching this point. Han Fei didn't care about the improvement of his spiritual energy. His spiritual power didn't increase but decreased. Even if he had the source water, he couldn't make up for it. However, ideally, even if there was a gap, the gap was not very big. At this time, his perception didn't change. In terms of strength, it had increased by nearly 600 waves. Seeing this number, Han Fei was surprised at first, and then he grinned. He used to be envious of the power of one wave. But now, it had increased by 600 waves at once. What did this mean? Now he could kill a few explorers with a casual wave of his hand. At this time, there was no time for Han Fei to practice the god-scaring painting. Otherwise, if he went to visualize this painting, maybe his soul power could be replenished. The next step, which was more critical, was to become a venerable. At the moment the bottleneck was broken, the energy in Han Fei's body was already being consumed crazily. Originally, the power provided by the source water was beyond his capacity. Now, the power provided by the source water suddenly began to be insufficient. Han Fei's body, which was twice the size of his original size, was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye like a deflated balloon. In less than 100 seconds, Han Fei had returned to his normal size. Although the remaining energy supply of the source water was very powerful, it was still not enough to support Han Fei's rapid breakthrough. Even Han Fei himself was a little surprised. It seemed that after his breakthrough to the demi-venerable realm, his energy consumption was even greater. Buzz, at this moment, Han Fei issued an order in his heart, and more than 500 energy fruits flew out of Forge the Universe. Bam! 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 The energy fruits exploded one after another. Pure power, under Han Fei's swallowing technique, poured into his body crazily. At that moment, Han Fei felt that the world seemed to have become different. His eyes seemed to be plated with a layer of mysterious power. With a casual glance, he could penetrate the void of thousands of kilometers, or even tens of thousands of kilometers. The surrounding space in front of him was not as mysterious as it used to be. Han Fei suddenly felt that there seemed to be a universe in the invisible dust. Han Fei saw a bit of mist, infinitely enlarging in front of his eyes. He could feel every drop of blood and every wisp of soul in his body. This was a mysterious feeling. When he was an explorer, Han Fei had already felt the power of blood rebirth. It was just that it was not very clear at that time. But now Han Fei seemed to understand it all at once. It seemed that his vitality was everywhere. What broken limb rebirth? What blood rebirth? That was simply his body's instinct. In addition, Han Fei could even see inexplicable particles floating between heaven and earth that were countless times smaller than spiritual energy. They seemed to be a kind of energy. They were shuttling wantonly. Although there were not many of them, they did not fill the whole world like spiritual energy. But they just existed like that. Smaller than spiritual energy particles, but more flexible than spiritual energy particles? In a trance, Han Fei understood something, chaotic qi? All of this was felt at the moment when Han Fei became a venerable. But what happened next made Han Fei confused again. In Han Fei's body, a black line appeared at some point. This black line appeared directly in Han Fei's heart. The blackness was spreading, quickly filling Han Fei's soul and sea of consciousness. At the moment they appeared, the old turtle was completely blocked. This kind of deepest secret of the body completely blocked the old turtle's perception in the darkness. Ba-dump, with every beat of Han Fei's heart, a strand of black silk began to intertwine in Han Fei's body. Slowly, all kinds of black silk threads densely covered Han Fei's body. From his mind to his flesh and blood, and even in some places, they completely overlapped with his spiritual heritage. At this moment, even Han Fei himself didn't know that he was undergoing an extremely strange mutation. Chapter 1481. There was no telling how long it had been, but Han Fei was still caught in an extremely weird change. In his body, a completely different spiritual vein seemed to have appeared. What Han Fei didn't know was that the power of this half-drop of origin water might have other uses. As a result, this power was forcibly used by him to find the limit of the explorer. Therefore, when this complete black spiritual vein appeared, the tens of thousands of spiritual fruits in Han Fei's body, including those ultra-quality spiritual fruits, all collapsed. They all turned into terrifying energy, providing power for the emergence of this black spiritual vein. This energy formed layers of thick cocoons inside and outside Han Fei's body. It seemed that the energy had been so much that it was overflowing and solidifying. However, the old turtle who was shielded, although he couldn't perceive it, the sense of despair made him feel to his horror that some extremely strange changes seemed to have taken place in Han Fei's body. There seemed to be waves surging outside him. And he himself, like the little turtle when it was young, couldn't control his body. The surging energy in the outside world was turbulent like a river tide. Even though the extent of this turbulence was slowly, at an invisible speed, it was decreasing. It seemed to have been swallowed by Han Fei. It might have been a few hours or it might have been a day. In short, it shouldn't be more than a day. In Han Fei's Forge the Universe, this kind of pure energy was exhausted. However, the black spiritual vein was still growing. It was still asking for Kacha. Almost subconsciously, the seal that enveloped Han Fei suddenly broke. The fire element energy that filled this secret realm instantly enveloped Han Fei. And Han Fei's body, like a desert, was in urgent need of energy spring water. Han Fei subconsciously activated the swallowing technique. Boundless energy continued to rush over. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Han Fei seemed to have a long dream. In the dream, his thoughts were taken into another mysterious world. This reminded him of the scene when he was awakened for the first time. It seemed that he was sitting in the spirit awakening fluid again. In front of him, a thin film appeared again. The demon purification pot slowly rotated in his sea of consciousness. However, the number of vines on it had become 3. However, Han Fei didn't notice the changes in the demon purification pot. Like a dream, Han Fei's consciousness was placed in the thin film. There seemed to be many creatures on the other side of the thin surface. However, he was on this side of the fog, so it was difficult for him to see what was on the other side of the thin film. Han Fei was still puzzled. Do I have a spiritual beast? He didn't know if it was because he was in such an environment that his thoughts were slower, or what was going on. Han Fei's head was very confused. Han Fei only had one belief, which was that the creatures on the other side should come over quickly. Han Fei could see many shadows in the film. These shadows seemed to be trying to break through the membrane and reach his side. But all of a sudden, a strange shadow appeared. That shadow seemed to have claws or something else. Suddenly, he appeared in front of the thin membrane. Rip! Han Fei could also feel that the claws tore other creatures into pieces. At first, only one creature was torn to shreds. But in the blink of an eye, the opposite side seemed to have become a massacre, and many creatures were torn to shreds. Han Fei watched on the side and felt his blood freeze. He only felt that the spiritual beast on the opposite side was so ferocious. In just a moment, there was nothing on the opposite side except for the spiritual beast. It seemed that no spiritual beast dared to approach again. Puff! Suddenly, Han Fei saw that the thin film was suddenly pierced into a cone shape by a sharp thorn. It seemed that it would be pierced at any time. The creature on the opposite side seemed to be trying very hard to pierce this layer of thin film. Seeing this, out of curiosity, Han Fei slowly stretched out his finger, wondering if he could touch the creature on the opposite side. Pop! When Han Fei's finger just touched the sharp thing, the thin film suddenly broke. All he saw was a black claw reaching out. The claw had 3 claws in the front and 1 at the back, and each claw was as sharp as a steel knife and as sharp as a thin cone. The claws and legs were pitch black, but they looked extremely powerful and ferocious. Han Fei was stunned on the spot. He only saw the claws scratching up and down, left and right. After a few flashes of knife light, a hole was made in the thin film with difficulty. When the creature all crawled over, Han Fei was even more dumbfounded. Is this a crow? As soon as the pitch-black bird heard Han Fei call it a crow, it immediately pounced on him and poked him with its beak. However, after penetrating this thin film, it was no longer the original one. Therefore, at this moment, the strength of this little crow was almost negligible. When it poked Han Fei's body, flames flickered and clanked. Seeing that it couldn't poke Han Fei, the bird didn't poke anymore. It flapped its wings and let out an scream. At this moment, Han Fei's consciousness was slowly withdrawing from this space. However, in a daze, he seemed to hear a bird's cry, as if he had been stabbed. However, Han Fei, who was in a mess, didn't care why there was a bird's cry here. Unlike Han Fei, when this bird cry appeared, the sky above the entire thousand-star city and the entire Enyang heaven was shrouded in black clouds. At the same time, there was a cry that resounded through the world. In the thousand-star city, all the venerable realm powerhouses and explorers looked up at the void. In the sky, black clouds were shrouded, and there was ear-piercing bird cry that shook the world. This was really not a good sign. Someone murmured, 10 years ago there was a strange sound. It chirped 3 times. Is it happening again? Someone was surprised. What is it this time? Someone pinched his fingers to calculate, but even though he was bleeding, he couldn't calculate anything. It seemed that everything about this bird cry had the ability to disrupt the heavenly secret. On the scattered stars island, Shueishenqi and the others all frowned. In the boundless sea, the sea was surging and the black clouds were rolling, which didn't look like a good thing. In the general's mansion, Shueishenqi said directly, "Tell everyone to be on guard. This is not a good sign." The star tortoise couldn't help but say, "Will there be a war? I'm just a temporary substitute. You know I'm not capable of fighting a war." Shueishenqi said with an ugly face, "Since he asked you to do this instead of me, do you think he's stupid? Or do you think I'm stupid?" After Shueishenqi left, the star tortoise sighed gloomily. "I've exposed too much. An excellent tortoise is indeed coveted." In the boundless sea, the black killer snail king was hiding somewhere near the wall of death with a venerable. At this moment, the black killer snail king said lightly, 10 years ago there was a sound that shook the world. We can all hear it in the forbidden area. This time, the situation is similar. It seems that something is happening in the human world again. Someone said, "My king, the human race's internal strife is obvious. Those human venerables can't always stay on the scattered stars island, can they?" The black killer snail king shook his head slightly. "My real body is not here. Now, even if there are 2 or even 3 times more people, it's useless. Wait. In the level 3 fishery, in a small restaurant on a dragon boat, an elegant man and a man in a black robe were drinking tea. All of a sudden, the elegant man trembled all over, and the teacup in his hand instantly shattered and disappeared without a trace. Opposite the elegant man, the man in a black robe also trembled and asked tentatively, "The Emperor Sparrow?" The elegant man nodded slightly. "It seems that none of us expected this. I thought it was already a great fortune for him to have the twin Enyang spirit swallowing fish. But now it seems that the appearance of the Emperor Sparrow is completely beyond my expectation." The man in a black robe cursed in a low voice, "Son of AB*TCH, Han Guanshu, isn't your son too talented and lucky? The Emperor Sparrow. It doesn't belong in our corner at all, does it?" The elegant man was Han Fei's father. At this moment, he didn't look very happy. He said, "To be precise, it's not a creature that should have appeared in this era. Even the 36 mysterious heavens, which cover billions of kilometers of the sea, can hardly find it." The man in a black robe was the patriarch of the Thug clan, Li Daxian. He scolded, "You're so mysterious, I hate this bad habit of yours the most. If you want to show off, just show off. So what if your son is outstanding? Are you afraid that he will steal your limelight?" A teacup reappeared in Han Guanshu's hand. He picked up the teapot and poured himself another cup of tea. "You only know its name, but you don't know. In history, when the Emperor Sparrow is born, there will be a storm of blood. Among the thousands of races in the world, it is regarded as a symbol of disaster. The man in a black robe sneered. "I don't know what disaster is. All I know is that this son of yours is one of a kind." Hearing what the man in a black robe said, Han Guanshu couldn't help but grin. "That's true. So what if he is the Emperor's sparrow? He is my son after all." Han Fei's thoughts seemed to have gone through a long time, or maybe only a very short time. Obviously, he couldn't tell the difference anymore. He didn't know how long it had been, but when he felt hungry, he suddenly came back to himself. At this moment, Han Fei was shocked to find that all the available energy fruits in Forge the Universe and the various creatures he had worked hard to collect were consumed at the moment he became a venerable. The source water no longer provided any energy or soul power. At this moment, he had already become a venerable. If it weren't for the massive amount of spiritual energy in Forge the Universe that was still pouring into his body, Han Fei would have almost forgotten that he was breaking through to the venerable realm. Seeing that the surrounding seals had been broken, Han Fei knew that the fire element energy in this secret realm was providing for his cultivation, and the power of the source water seemed to have been exhausted. At this moment, he couldn't feel it at all. At this moment, although he had become a venerable, the breakthrough hadn't ended yet. Han Fei sat cross-legged and continued to absorb the fire element energy. Fortunately, he had enough resources. If ordinary people became venerable, the resources he had would be enough for them to become venerable 5 or 6 times. The momentum around Han Fei was also rapidly growing. After a full hour, when Han Fei felt that it was difficult for the spiritual energy to promote his strength, he frowned and slowly opened his eyes. The effect of spiritual energy is so low. Chapter 1482. Han Fei seemed to have forgotten what he had done in a daze. In fact, when he swallowed the source water last time, he was in a coma for a long time. Han Fei estimated that the situation this time should be the same as the last time. When he was advancing to the venerable realm, Han Fei was so focused that he didn't even look at his own information. After all, the result was the same whether he looked at it earlier or later. In any case, he had already become a venerable. When he first heard of the venerable realm, he was still in the heavenly water village. At that time, the venerable realm was still an extremely mysterious realm for him. Han Fei felt that the use of spiritual energy had slowed down, and the fluctuations of his power were also very restrained. All of this showed that he'd already entered a completely new realm. In fact, Han Fei woke up now because the spiritual energy in his body, even the liquefied spiritual energy, was not enough to promote the improvement of his strength. For a long time, the human body lacked spiritual energy and would become hungry. This was common sense even for fishers. At this moment, Han Fei certainly felt it. However, at the venerable realm, the improvement of spiritual energy on the body was almost negligible. If there was a big use for it now, it must be the chaotic qi. However, this was exactly what Han Fei lacked now. At this time, Han Fei didn't stop cultivating but tried to decompose the spiritual energy. After all, the 70% dismantling rate of the venerable realm was no joke. Of course, Han Fei was also very confident. After all, he was going to become a king. If he couldn't even achieve this, it would be a joke. At this moment, Han Fei's body seemed to be burning. He was using the scorching power in this small world to quickly and massively dismantle the spiritual energy. When the dismantling rate of the spiritual energy reached 50%, Han Fei found that in the spiritual energy, some slight power began to escape. This was not the power of the spiritual qi itself, but the power of the great path contained in the spiritual qi that was dissipating. When Han Fei's dismantling rate of the spiritual energy reached 72%, his cultivation efficiency doubled. However, Han Fei was still dissatisfied, because the method of slowly improving his soul, strength, and physique through the dismantling rate of the spiritual energy was still too slow. Han Fei could tell that if he cultivated at full speed and had enough spiritual spring and energy tubes, his physical strength might be less than 1/10,000th of his current strength after a whole day's work. It could be said that he was far from it. In other words, he wanted to double his strength again through the method of spiritual energy? In that case, it would take at least 30 years. Bang! Suddenly, the spiritual energy and energy vortexes around Han Fei were shattered by Han Fei. This speed was too slow. However, a twofold increase in strength was equivalent to a level 80 to a level 81 or level 82. It was even to the extent that I'm unable to attain the peak of the elementary exalt realm, yet I actually need 30 years of time? Who the hell would be able to take it? Even if he accelerated it with Forge the Universe, it would still take 15 years. Suddenly, Han Fei thought of something. Right? Could the time in Forge the Universe change as he became a venerable? Thinking about that, Han Fei closed his eyes and looked at the foggy space inside the demon purification pot. He glanced around and saw the number 2 of 128 in the void under the time chain. This meant that the time in Forge the Universe was twice as slow as that in the outside world. However, what really excited Han Fei was that behind the time chain of light, there was the word upgradable. Wow! Han Fei clicked on the word and immediately received a message. The message said that to upgrade the time chain, a wisp of chaotic chi was needed. When he saw this message, Han Fei was stunned. Damn, it wasn't easy for him to accumulate a huge amount of spiritual spring and spiritual fruit. However, once he became a venerable, he found that spiritual energy didn't work at all. Wasn't it a pain in the ass? However, could a wisp of chaotic chi upgrade the time chain of light? Han Fei certainly wouldn't miss such a good thing. Although Han Fei didn't know how precious chaotic chi was, it was nothing compared to the total amount of chaotic chi needed by the entire venerable realm. Once the effect of the time chain was increased, even from 2 times to 3 times, it would save him a lot of time. It was equivalent to reducing a task that would take 30 years to complete to 10 years. This sounded crazy enough. Besides, the current little white could also produce chaotic chi. And it could produce a wisp of chaotic chi at once. God was on his side. Han Fei was overjoyed and directly summoned Little Black and Little White. Han Fei immediately hugged Little White, kissed her hard, and said, "Daughter, swallow a wisp of chaotic chi for Daddy." Han Fei knew that this would probably scare the old turtle. However, there was nothing he could do. After all, he also needed chaotic chi. Even if he didn't let the old turtle know now, he would probably find out in the future. But to Han Fei's surprise, the old turtle surprisingly didn't ask anything. Han Fei was curious and couldn't help but ask, "Old Yuan, what are you doing? Did anything happen while I was in the venerable realm?" At that time, the old turtle really wanted to howl a few times, but he managed to hold himself back. He only heard him say, "Woo! You do your own thing first. I have something to think about." Han Fei was puzzled. Why did the old turtle change his temper? However, at this moment, he was only thinking about the time chain. How could he think so much? In Han Fei's sea of consciousness, the old turtle's body was trembling slightly. If Han Fei came over to take a look, he would know that the old turtle seemed to be very scared now. The old turtle's eyes flickered and he muttered in his heart, "Is that the Emperor Sparrow? It's the Emperor Sparrow. Is my turtle life destined to be so rough? The Emperor Sparrow. I just landed on a random person. How did that person awaken the Emperor Sparrow?" This question seemed to have been bothering the old turtle for a long time. Now, he was sure of one thing. He couldn't run away for the time being. He couldn't help but think of Han Guanshu's proposal. Han Fei should be a person with great luck, right? Although dual-talented spiritual beasts were quite amazing, there were indeed such spiritual beasts in this world. However, the one who awakened the Emperor Sparrow's spiritual beast was really rare. The old turtle pondered, if it really doesn't work, should I establish a long-term friendship with Han Fei? At least, after following Han Fei for so many years, this kid was still a loyal and affectionate person. He was just a little bit cruel to the enemy. He was quite kind to his own people. At this time, Han Fei had already summoned Little Black and Little White. Little White seemed to have received some kind of inheritance. When Han Fei said that, he knew what this chaotic chi was. All of a sudden, Whitey's body lit up. Immediately afterward, Han Fei saw a strand of hair-like gray mist slowly spit out from Little White's mouth. It was only about 3 inches long. Seeing this scene, the old turtle was shocked. What the F***ck is this spiritual beast? What kind of strength did he have to be able to produce chaotic chi? If this thing grows up, how powerful will it be? However, the old turtle still didn't say anything. It was already wondering how to get along with Han Fei in the future. On the other side, Han Fei was already dumbfounded. Is this the chaotic chi? For a long time, Han Fei didn't think it was the source of spiritual energy. Although he had a lot of spiritual energy, he had worked hard to save it. However, now he actually obtained a wisp of chaotic chi so easily? For some reason, Han Fei felt that he wanted to swallow this thing very much. It seemed that this thing was very beneficial to his cultivation. In fact, Han Fei knew that this thing must be an extremely top-level energy. Even the old tortoise had only managed to accumulate a few strands after absorbing for so long. Yet, Little White spat out a wisp of it so easily? Daddy, I'm so tired, so hungry. Han Fei suddenly came back to himself, only to see that Little Black and Little White were circling each other. This was what they would do when they were about to hibernate. Han Fei's heart did a flip. This chaotic chi must not be simple. Even if Little White could do it, it was still not easy. Immediately, with a thought, a river appeared in Forge the Universe, which was full of spiritual spring water. Little Black and Little White directly went inside. In an instant, the 2 small fishes turned first and formed a yin-yang diagram. A huge amount of spiritual energy was drilling into their bodies. Although Han Fei still had something to ask Xiaobai, Han Fei could feel that Little White and Little Black were so tired that they seemed to be paralyzed. Suppressing his desire for the chaotic chi, Han Fei thought of an idea and upgraded the chain of time. On the demon purification pot, a small vine suddenly stretched out. With a gentle scoop, under Han Fei's eager gaze, the wisp of chaotic chi was scooped away. Han Fei was quite guilty at that time. After a brand new energy came out, he hadn't even felt it yet, and he offered it to the demon purification pot? This made his heart itch. When Han Fei looked at the demon purification pot again, he found that the chain of time didn't change immediately, but the words upgrading appeared. After staring at it for dozens of seconds, Han Fei saw that there was no change in this message. Therefore, Han Fei very naturally and curiously diverted his attention to his new personal data. Owner Han Fei level greater than 80, venerable, spiritual energy 420,000/420,000, convertible, chaotic chi unconverted spiritual power 55666/79999, damaged, perception range greater than 12,000 kilometers, power greater than 3,000 waves, first spiritual heritage unknown. Second spiritual heritage unknown, first spiritual beast twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish level 70. Second spiritual beast emperor sparrow level 1, main art heaven stealing technique, level 6 avoid fishing, venerable level. Divine quality. At first glance, Han Fei naturally looked at the overall situation. His gaze had just fallen on the word transformable behind the spirit chi. All of a sudden, he felt a jolt in his heart. He immediately looked down. Shoot, Emperor Sparrow? What the hell? When did I get a spiritual beast? Chapter 1483. At this moment, Han Fei was dumbfounded. Why did he suddenly get another spiritual beast? Usually, one could only obtain a spiritual beast when one's spirit was awakened, right? How did he get a spiritual beast after breaking through to the venerable realm? It had to be said that the experience of forgetting to acquire a gifted spiritual beast was something that countless people had experienced. It seemed that a person could have a gifted spiritual beast as long as they enchanted it. As for what he would gain, it all depended on fate. In fact, the forgetting went both ways. Perhaps it was because spiritual beasts could trust humans better after forgetting their memories. Han Fei felt that the name of this spiritual beast was so strange. Could it be a bird? Could it be that there was a fish called the Emperor Sparrow? After discovering such a major mistake, Han Fei summoned the Emperor Sparrow immediately. Whoosh! With a flash of black light, Han Fei saw a black crow, the size of a palm, in front of him. The crow was looking at him with its head tilted, looking rather arrogant and cold. It was clearly a crow, but it was like a goshawk, holding its head high and chest out. Crow? Han Fei felt that he had seen this crow somewhere before. It was just that he did not have any impression of it. Ah! Han Fei saw this little thing barking wildly at him. That sound was as if he had been stabbed 3 times. You're the one who's being very fierce, so why are you acting like someone's bullying you? In Han Fei's eyes, information emerged. Name Emperor Sparrow. Introduction. This is a mysterious creature from ancient times, and it is considered inauspicious by all races. DK was born to be a monarch and looked down on both the past and present. The imperial sparrow was the strongest among all the ferocious beasts of the primitive age. Level 1 Equality. Primeval beast, stored spiritual energy 10,000 points, food, depends on your mood, battle skill, eye of disaster, remarks. Follow the heart of the emperor. Otherwise, disasters will befall you. Remark 2, rumor has it that anyone who kills the Empress Sparrow will die. Hiss, when Han Fei saw the message, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. What the hell did he create? You're only level 1, and you want to proclaim yourself an emperor? Why don't you go to heaven? If a real venerable sovereign saw you, he would definitely kill you. Also, this thing had to be done according to his wishes? Otherwise, would a calamity descend? Was there a mistake? I can pinch it to death with one finger. Looking at the Emperor Sparrow, who was looking at him with its head tilted, Han Fei heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this thing was only level 1. What if he was at the same level as Little Black and Little White? He might not even be able to defeat him. Little Crow, what do you want to eat? Daddy will make it for you. Hiss, the old turtle took a deep breath. Damn it, isn't this a death wish? Sure enough, the moment DK heard this, he let out an ah, as if he had been stabbed by a knife. The old turtle quickly shouted, Han Fei, do you want to die? This was an Emperor Sparrow. Don't ever provoke it. What is a crow? How could it compare to the large sparrow? Quickly apologize. Han Fei. Han Fei was about to ask, how do you know the Emperor Sparrow too? However, all of a sudden, the secret realm where Han Fei was, the space changed and the fire element surged. Although Han Fei had subconsciously absorbed a tremendous amount of fire elements, it was difficult for Han Fei to quickly absorb all the fire elements in the entire treasure trove by himself. He didn't know if this secret realm was useless after the source water was swallowed. At this moment, the energy in the secret realm seemed to be crazily leaping out to the outside world. Crack! The sound of the seal breaking was heard. Immediately afterward, Han Fei saw a big eyeball suddenly appear in this secret realm. In that eyeball, blood like magma was flowing, and it stared at Han Fei. The old turtle hurriedly shouted, "Be ****starred, quickly take back the Emperor Sparrow. There are some things that I'll tell you slowly. Now, try not to provoke the eye of the heavenly path." Han Fei glanced at the little crow and took it back with a thought. What kind of look is that? I'm your master anyway. Can't you give me some face? Dong 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 dong, the eyeball of the eye of the heavenly path seemed to be expanding and contracting. This was something that Han Fei had never seen before. When he fought before, this thing didn't react at all. Now, it was nothing more than becoming a venerable. Was it really necessary? Did the Emperor Sparrow really activate the Eye of the Heavenly Path? Was this big eyeball going to attack him? Wait, wait, wait. Suddenly, Han Fei seemed to hear an ethereal melody appearing in this secret realm. When this sound rang, Han Fei's mind was a little confused. He felt that something seemed to have appeared in the endless fire element. Han Fei, wake up. Love 999. Han Fei suddenly shivered and realized that he had encountered a formidable enemy. Han Fei looked around and saw some flaming figures wrapped in fire element. He didn't know when they had appeared around him. For some reason, Han Fei felt that these figures seemed a little familiar. When Han Fei saw a figure in the fire who was using a sword, he immediately gasped. Is this Sunmu? There were too many figures around. The old turtle shouted, Heavenly demons, they're all heavenly demons. I told you not to mess with the Emperor Sparrow. Are you stupid? Han Fei's face was black. Old Yuan, watch your mouth. It's my spiritual beast, so I can do whatever I want with it. But tell me first, what are heavenly demons? The old turtle said, Heavenly demons are demonic shadows created by the great Tao of heaven from that person's memory world or the path of the great Tao when it punishes or wants to kill a person. These are just the most basic heavenly demons. Try your best to kill them first and see if there are any more. When it came to fighting, Han Fei suddenly became bolder. Just now, he saw his own information and whatnot. Oh, my strength has increased by more than 1,000 times. How long has it been? This level of improvement was simply terrifying. If there were no accidents, his pure strength could definitely kill those junior venerables that he had seen. Logically speaking, when he was a peak-level explorer, Han Fei knew that his strength was already comparable to that of a venerable. Judging from the description of Shueishenqi and the old turtle, if it was purely based on strength, a venerable who had just become a venerable would generally have no more than 1,500 wave. Later, in battles, this was also proved. Even a junior peak-level venerable generally had no more than 2,000 wave. This was also the reason why Han Fei could kill a venerable when he was still an explorer. After all, he could defeat 10 people with great strength. Even if your realm was higher and your strength was not as good as mine, I could still kill you. However, the premise was that you had to have a chance. At the venerable level, it was extremely difficult to use secret methods. It was almost impossible to find a secret technique that had no side effect. At least, there shouldn't be one in the Yin-Yang heaven. Even Han Fei's Beast King art had lost its effect after he became a demigod. Their improvement was extremely limited, and Han Fei's current power of nature had almost exceeded this limit. Therefore, secret methods were naturally of little use. Now, Han Fei had just become a venerable, but his strength had already reached 3,000 waves. Some ordinary heavenly talents, even if they were lucky enough to survive until they became a venerable and reached the peak level of a mid-level venerable, their strength was only about 3,000 wave. This meant that in the past, Han Fei needed to use the power of the Great Way to fight with a mid-level venerable. However, he couldn't kill them at all. After becoming a demigod, Han Fei had the confidence to compete with a mid-level venerable. Now, if he used the power of the Great Way, it would be easy for him to kill a mid-level venerable. Boom! Han Fei made a fist mark, and the fist light penetrated the fire element, crushed out a flaming python, and rushed straight at the Eye of the Heavenly Path. This blow was not to blow up this big eyeball. It was just that Han Fei wanted to test how powerful the Eye of the Heavenly Path was. Since Ren Tianfei, the thug patriarch, and old Han could come here several times, it meant that the Eye of the Heavenly Path was not invincible. If he really couldn't do anything, he could use the power of the Great Way to force his way out of the Yin-Yang Palace. At the moment when Han Fei attacked, a large number of so-called extraterrestrial demons had already bombarded Han Fei. The old turtle said, "These are the most basic and ordinary extraterrestrial demons. They should have been created according to your realm. I estimate that they should have the strength of a beginner venerable. F*ck so powerful? These were not the previous puppet. These were venerables. Previously, the Black Killer Snail King fought with its projection, which gave Han Fei a headache. But now, the Eye of the Heavenly Path was even more unreasonable and directly created extraterrestrial demons of the same realm. He couldn't even remember how many of the opponents he had killed and how much they hated him. Anyway, there were dozens of extraterrestrial demons at a glance. Damn it, it's not easy to defeat them. Bam! 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 Fortunately, Han Fei's strength was much stronger than those in the same realm. Golden fist marks blasted out and smashed these so-called extraterrestrial demons into pieces with each punch. However, after the bodies of these extraterrestrial demons were shattered, they could be reassembled as if they had been reborn. This stumped Han Fei. No matter how weak these extraterrestrial demons were, they were still beginner venerables, not nobodies. Han Fei asked, "Old Yuan, is there any way to completely destroy these extraterrestrial demons?" The old turtle nodded. "I'm thinking that you don't have much chaotic energy now. You haven't even stabilized your realm yet. If you want to kill the extraterrestrial demons, why don't you hide in the small gourd world first? If you leave, they will naturally dissipate." Han Fei was speechless. "Damn, is this the answer you give me? I know the answer even if you don't tell me." Bam! At this moment, Han Fei's sacrificing punch blasted through the layers of fire elements and almost hit the big eyeball. In the end, the big eyeball shot out a red light, and his sacrificing punch was actually crushed in the light. Han Fei gritted his teeth. This is not a solution. Blindly attacking the extraterrestrial demons would not only fail to destroy them but also waste his time and strength. It was not worthwhile. Gemini Divine Technique. Han Fei planned to use this technique to buy himself time to enter Forge the Universe. However, under the gaze of the Eye of the Heavenly Path, the Gemini Divine Technique didn't work at all. Helplessly, Han Fei could only fight while setting up arrays. Chapter 1484. Huff! Han Fei gasped for a while in Forge the Universe and sat down on the ground. Little Black and Little White returned to the spiritual spring and began to absorb the spiritual spring. He didn't know if it was because Little White had just spat out the chaotic chi, but the Gemini Divine Technique almost collapsed in less than 100 minutes. Han Fei took a breath and immediately asked, "Old Yuan, what's going on? Did you see how the Emperor Sparrow came about?" Han Fei was full of questions now. "That thing doesn't look like a good bird. Just because I said a few words to it, it brought me a disaster? Damn it, who can stand it?" The old turtle said leisurely, "You have secrets that I couldn't see at the time. If you ask me, I've only seen the Emperor Sparrow after it was born. Isn't this your second spiritual beast?" Han Fei's heart did a flip. "Don't you think it's strange that I have a second spiritual beast?" The old turtle shrugged. "What's strange about that? In ancient times, some people cultivated their strength to the limit and tried their best to have a second spiritual beast. Among them, the simplest way is to create a reincarnation. Because of the infusion of the original body's power and bloodline, the reincarnation is very likely to awaken a powerful spiritual beast." When the old turtle said this, Han Fei immediately thought of Tengu. Tengu had awakened a legendary-level spiritual beast, the white dragon feather lobster. In a small place like the Heavenly Water Village, it was impossible. It wasn't until Tang Yen appeared that Han Fei discovered the mystery. Hearing the old turtle's words, Han Fei didn't ask any more questions. However, his situation was different from that of a reincarnation. He looked at his information. At this moment, his second spiritual heritage was displayed as unknown. But before this, the information on this side showed that he had not awakened. This meant that his second spiritual heritage had actually been awakened. It should have been awakened when he took the source water and fell asleep. Like the first spiritual heritage, it was also an unknown spiritual heritage. This showed that the level of the second spiritual heritage was also not ordinary. Considering the disappearance of all the energy fruits in Forge the Universe, it was not hard to imagine how much energy he swallowed while he was asleep. Even in the secret realm, when he woke up, he found that the fire elemental energy and the temperature of the flames in the secret realm had dropped significantly. Now that he thought about it, it should have something to do with the awakening of his second spiritual vein. Han Fei really wanted to feel his second spiritual heritage. However, the second spiritual vein seemed to have been hidden, and he actually did not discover it. There were still a lot of questions. Han Fei didn't dwell on the spiritual heritage but asked, "Old Yuan, do you know the Emperor Sparrow? What kind of species was this? Shouldn't human spiritual beasts all be marine creatures? Why would I awaken a bird?" The old turtle sneered. "There are thousands of races in the world, and any race can become a naturally endowed spiritual beast. What kind of logic was this? I don't know either. After all, spiritual beasts are unique to humans, which are different from our associated spirit. It wouldn't be surprising if you see someone become the companion spirit of a fish in the future." Han Fei rolled his eyes. "Isn't that surprising? Tell me, what else is magical?" The old turtle continued. "As for the Emperor Sparrow, it only exists in legends. However, in my era there was a story about the Emperor Sparrow. That's a true powerhouse, an existence that can stand up to the gods." Han Fei's eyes widened. Is it so powerful?" The old turtle snorted. "Do you think that's it? The Emperor Sparrow has always existed only in legends. For example, in my era, it was said that the Emperor Sparrow was quite terrifying. It was said that the Emperor Sparrow led the primeval ferocious beasts and launched a 3,000-year expedition against the creatures known as the divine beasts of creation." Han Fei asked quickly, "What happened then?" The old turtle said unhurriedly, "That's all legends. I don't know much about it either. But later, the primeval ferocious beasts and the divine beasts of creation still exist in this world, but they are extremely rare and rarely appear." Han Fei was puzzled. "Wait, Old Yuan, are the primeval ferocious beasts more powerful, or the divine beasts of creation? Also, how are these creatures ranked? What's the level of the ancient mutants?" The old turtle thought to himself, since Han Fei has awakened the Emperor Sparrow, he must be extraordinary in the future. He'd better answer all the questions now. The old turtle said, "Actually, it's not complicated. There are differences in grades. Ordinary creatures, rare creatures, and exotic creatures are the most common creatures in this world. When they reach the legendary grade, it only means that this kind of creature is very powerful and has a lot of room for growth. And when they reach the legendary grade, they are already extremely rare. The legendary creatures and the ancient mutants are of similar quality. Most of them are descendants of the bloodlines of the ferocious beasts and the divine beasts. They have a lot of room for growth and are extremely rare for ordinary people. However, in this vast sea there are actually many of them, but ordinary people can't meet them. So, people think that they only exist in legends." Then, the old turtle continued, "After that, it's the primeval ferocious beasts and the divine beasts of creation. At this point, it's no longer about quality. These creatures are mostly divided according to the era. As for the mysterious ones, I don't know either. They are indeed very mysterious." "Era?" The old turtle nodded. "Just like the Age of Doom you mentioned, it's different from your current era. The primeval era is also different from the primeval continent, and the primeval continent is still different from the chaotic world at the beginning of the world. In every era, there would be powerful beings appearing. You can't absolutely say that the creatures of this era are stronger than those of that era. You have to fight them to know that." After listening to the old turtle's introduction, Han Fei had a complete concept of the grades of these creatures. So, the Emperor Sparrow is the representative of the primeval ferocious beasts? After all, in his introduction, there was such a sentence: among the tens of thousands of primeval ferocious beasts, the Emperor Sparrow is the best. In a word, the Emperor Sparrow's status was infinitely higher. Of course, the only thing that made Han Fei a little depressed was that this thing symbolized some kind of disaster. Didn't this mean that if he had the Emperor Sparrow in the future, he would become the enemy of the whole world if it was discovered? But now, Han Fei was not in the mood to care about this. What the old tortoise said today touched on too many secrets. Han Fei asked tentatively, "Old Yuan, which era do you belong to?" The old turtle was silent for a while and said unhurriedly, "I was born in the Age of Gods." Han Fei's eyelids twitched. "Well, King no. Those creatures fought each other and seemed to be all killed in the end. The giant king once said that the gods fell. So it's about 130,000 years since the current era, right?" However, as soon as Han Fei said this number, the old turtle said, "The Age of Gods. This is a legendary era. It's said that it took 60 million years from the rise of this era to the end." Pooh! Han Fei almost vomited blood. Damn it, what the hell is this? From the end of the gods to the end of the Age of Gods to the present, it's only been 130,000 years in total. Now you King say that the Age of Gods has a history of 60 million years? Seeing that Han Fei was furious, the old turtle realized that he seemed to have said too much. So, the old turtle said slowly, This is just a rumor. Maybe I'm wrong. It's also possible that it has a history of 6 million years. However, Han Fei didn't believe the old turtle anymore. 60 million years and 6 million years, there was a difference of 10 times the amount of time. Also, even if the Age of Gods really only has a history of 6 million years, do you think it's a short time? Seeing that Han Fei was still surprised, the old turtle said, Hey! You're already a venerable. Why are you still making a fuss? The period I'm talking about is just collectively known as the Age of Gods in the long river of history. And during this period, I don't even know how many great changes have taken place. Han Fei said leisurely, "Then Old Yuan, which period of the Age of Gods were you born in?" Old Yuan said, I was born in the last million years, which can be regarded as the end of the Age of Gods. Han Fei secretly heaved a sigh of relief, fearing that this old guy would say, "I lived through the entire Age of Gods." Then he had to find a way to kill this guy immediately. Han Fei asked, "Then what about before the Age of Gods? Is it the ancient primeval times?" Old Yuan chuckled. "I haven't experienced it. How would I know? It's just that I heard there are a few more eras. But exactly which era corresponds to which era? Who knows? You can ask a god who crossed the Age of Gods. You'll definitely know." Han Fei was embarrassed and no longer mentioned this topic. Although this secret was quite deep, it was meaningless to him. 60 million years of history. His two lives combined were less than 100 years old. What was the point of studying the history of tens of millions of years? Han Fei glanced at the energy in Forge the Universe, which had been consumed. Outside, the Eye of Heavenly Path was watching. His strength hadn't been stabilized yet. At this moment, it was really a troubled time. At this time, Han Fei glanced at his information again. Immediately, he was attracted by the transformable option of spiritual energy. Spiritual energy can be transformable? What can it be transformed into? Seeing the word, untransformed, followed by the chaotic energy, Han Fei had some ideas in his heart. Could spiritual qi be converted into chaotic qi to exist? If so, would there be a limit to his chaotic energy?